election processes and everything else. And I agree with them. That's why I said that together with Expo, together with the development of the country, and in that EU report you could have seen that they were saying that Serbia's economy is doing perfectly well, but you were not interested to say that. Our strategic goal is to become a full-fledged EU member state. And we'll do all necessary reforms, and we'll speed up all the processes, and we'll do our best to finish it by the end of 2026. It doesn't mean that we're going to be a part of EU in 2027 or 2028. It's up to EU countries. But whether we are going to say everything the worst about our traditional friends or partners from the East, no, we are not going to do it.
Mr. President, we have to end there. Thank you very much for joining me on Hard Talk.
Thank you very much.
That was Hard Talk. I'm Saroja Coelho. You're listening to CBC Radio 1. Have a great day.
Good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio, and we're live downtown on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. Thanks so much for joining us. Abby just whispered in my ear it's -7 out there with all that snow, and a high today of, cloudy, first of all, chance of flurries and fog patches, and then our high today will be -6 in Winnipeg. Wherever you're joining us from, appreciate having you along. I suspect the morning drive will be just a touch slower as we all get used to driving in these conditions in the city, at least. Across the province, of course, snow has been down for a lot longer than it has here in Winnipeg. Let's say good morning to the team. Corey Funk is back this morning. Good morning, Corey. Corey directs the show and will cover the morning commute. Good morning to Abby Adeyemi, as mentioned. Abby is our technical producer and also covers the weather on the show. Good morning to Kevin Nipatebo, our YouTube producer, making us all look good with that beautiful lighting. Thanks, Kev. And obviously making the show look good, too. So if you want visuals and you're listening to the radio, you want to listen to it and watch on YouTube this morning. Maybe have that phone in your lap while you're on the way somewhere with the bus. Let's get to what's happening in our news center. Heather Wells is also here, part of our team, and has developing news today. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, a former BC police chief says the latest police shooting in Winnipeg is more proof officers need body cameras. A man was shot dead by police outside Unicity Mall on Sunday. Police say the suspect had stabbed an officer in the throat. Former West Vancouver Police Chief Cash Heed says officers are going to have to justify their use of lethal force. We'll hear more coming up. As well, some Winnipeg charities are starting to feel the squeeze as the Canada Post strike continues into its second week. We'll hear about that as well in our next local news coming up at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Heather's with us, of course, throughout the morning. Let's get into what else is coming up on the show. Do you have a great neighbor? You never forget them, even when you move away, right? You might go, remember that neighbor we had? Well, what made them special? We're going to hear about someone's great neighbor in Winnipeg today on the program. It's a really lovely story, and maybe it'll prompt you to call us about your best neighbor ever. In addition, in the first hour, we're going to talk to a psychology professor about Cambridge Dictionary's word of the year, manifest. Can you actually manifest great things? Stay tuned for that conversation and more. Right now, let's get to World Report, which is coming up at 6. It's 1 minute to.
On Cue with Tom Power. Paris Hilton is a pop culture icon and has been ever since she stepped out with Nicole Richie as one of the stars of The Simple Life. She's also a musician, and now she's back with a brand new record. So she'll be here to talk to you about her life, her fame, and her new music.
That's hot.
That's coming up on Cue, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. The Canadian government has already begun its response to Donald Trump's tariff threat. Some premiers are also speaking out. Trump said he will slap a 25% tariff on all products entering the country from Canada and Mexico. Unless those countries slow the flow of drugs and illegal migrants across their borders. Let's go to Janice McGregor in our Parliamentary Bureau. Janice, how are Canadian leaders responding so far?
Marcia, as luck would have it, the federal cabinet committee that was revived to focus on Canada's relationship with the U.S. in the aftermath of Trump's election victory was actually meeting at the time this threatening social media post went up. By the end of the evening, the two lead ministers, Chrystia Freeland and Dominic LeBon, had put out a statement saying that trade is balanced, that the U.S. needs Canada's energy, that enforcement agencies are prioritizing a fentanyl crackdown, and that the number of U.S. Border Patrol encounters with migrants crossing the northern border illegally are a small fraction of the number along Mexico's border. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau then had what sources told CBC News was a good phone call with Trump making some of these same points, but that wasn't the only call he had to make last night. Earlier in the day, Canada's premiers had already begun stirring the pot, circulating a letter calling for an urgent meeting so they could discuss their participation in some kind of as yet undefined Team Canada approach to engaging with the incoming administration. Trump's social media post triggered several premiers to double down on their concerns, with posts of their own taking shots at the federal government's handling of the file so far. Trudeau's late evening calls to the premiers of Ontario and Quebec last night, a sign that he's fighting a political battle now on two fronts.
If there's no unified response, how could that affect Canada's negotiating position?
Well, hard to see how it makes it stronger. To have a key swing vote in the House of Commons, like NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, for example, posting that Trudeau can't keep his head in the sand and needs to stand up and fight like hell. Perrin Beatty, who was the head of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce during the first Trump administration, says this kind of response is not smart.
I can't think of a worse response than to start a spinning contest across the 49th parallel.
Former Conservative Cabinet Minister James Moore last night suggested the point of this threat of Trump's might be to soften Canada up. And if Trump was watching the reaction of Canadian stakeholders last night, he might have concluded it's working.
Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
Janice McGregor reporting from Ottawa. Trump also vowed to levy an additional 10% tariff on all Chinese products sent to the U.S. The president-elect says it is because of China's failure to curb the flow of illegal drugs into the United States. The CBC's Crystal Gomansing is following this angle of the story for us. And Crystal, what are we hearing from Beijing today?
Well, officials in Beijing are saying they're focused on maintaining an open dialogue with the United States. This as China gets ready to face aggressive tariffs on everything it exports to the U.S. China's ambassador to Australia says this could impact the country's bilateral relations.
First and most is to continue the good relation and momentum between our two countries. Of course, the U.S. policy on trade with China, with other countries as well, will have impact. And that is really an important element that we have to consider.
Now, in Beijing, a spokesperson for the foreign ministry was asked if talks are taking place with President-elect Donald Trump's transition team. Mao Ning said, as a principle, we are open to maintaining dialogue and communication. In a statement, a spokesperson for the Chinese embassy in the United States said that no one will win a trade war or a tariff war. Now, Trump has said in a post on his Truth Social page that he would impose the additional tariff of 10% on Chinese imports until it stops the flow of illegal drugs into the U.S. Beijing says it has already taken steps to combat drug trafficking thanks to an agreement between President Xi Jinping and U.S. President Joe Biden, which was signed just over a year ago.
Thank you, Crystal.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Crystal Gomansing in London. The European Union is urging Israel and Hezbollah to sign the U.S.-backed ceasefire and get the deal done. An Israeli official told Reuters news agency Israel's security cabinet will likely approve the text later today. The EU's top diplomat, Joseph Borrell, is urging Lebanese officials to do the same.
There is not an excuse for not implementing a ceasefire. Otherwise, Lebanon will fall apart.
Officials say the deal will require Israeli troops to withdraw from southern Lebanon. Then Lebanese troops will instead patrol the border region, which is a Hezbollah stronghold. That could make it possible for 60,000 Israelis to return to their homes in northern Israel. Canada's Senate could pass a private member's bill today. It's called Georgina's Law, and it proposes a national strategy to stop intimate partner violence. The CBC's Heather Gillis now with more on Georgina's story.
My last beating was September 25th, 2014.
A beating so severe it almost took Georgina McGrath's life. She survived the horrific violence committed by an ex-partner. Now an advocate, McGrath is trying to prevent violence against other women.
Well, there's no actual strategy nationally.
Newfoundland and Labrador Senator Fabian Manning and McGrath have been trying to get one into law since 2018.
Every 6 days in this country, there is a woman killed for an intimate partner.
Manning says if a victim goes to hospital with a gunshot or knife wound, it's automatically reported to police. But there's no requirement to report physical assaults like the one McGrath survived.
Through Georgina's law, we'll address some of that over time. It's not going to happen overnight.
Manning sponsored the law, a private member's bill in the Senate. It gives government 2 years to make a strategy, with progress updates every 2 years after that.
There's an incredible amount of intimate partner violence in this country. It's left me bewildered.
Today, McGrath and Manning hope it will pass third reading, then make its way into the House of Commons.
So, this sets the groundwork for something that really needs to be firmly put in place right across our country.
If the bill passes, McGrath says she'll be elated and hopes it can pass a gridlocked House of Commons by this spring. Heather Gillis, CBC News, Toronto.
Applause for Gisèle Pellicot as she arrives at the courthouse in Avignon, France. Proceedings continue today in the trial against her ex-husband and dozens of other men accused of raping her. Today in court, prosecutors are expected to say what sentences they will seek for those 50 other defendants. They are seeking a maximum 20-year prison sentence for her 71-year-old former husband. He admitted to drugging his then-wife and inviting dozens of strangers to their home to rape her while she was unconscious. Paul Bernardo is scheduled to appear before the Parole Board of Canada today. He is serving a life sentence for the kidnapping, sexual assault, and murder of 2 Ontario teens in the 1990s. Bernardo has already been denied parole twice. It is Election Day in Nova Scotia. Progressive Conservative Premier Tim Houston called a snap election last month. It has sent voters to the polls 8 months earlier than expected. Some political observers say they believe the timing has a lot to do with the plummeting popularity of the federal Liberals. Kayla Hounsell has been speaking with voters.
I think there's a lot to think about.
Robert Ferguson watches politics closely. He's got a number of issues on his mind.
A lot of interrelated issues like housing, like bread and butter issues, the economy, employment, healthcare is a big issue.
In 2021, Nova Scotia Progressive Conservative leader Tim Houston won on a promise to fix healthcare. He's seeking a second mandate, but there are twice as many people without a primary care provider now. Houston says he needs more time. Ferguson's wife, Debbie, agrees.
Tim Houston, I think, made lots of gain in the healthcare system.
Houston called a snap election last month. Political scientist Tom Urbaniak says he did that because he wanted the election to happen while Justin Trudeau, consistently unpopular in the polls, is still prime minister.
In terms of cold calculation, he might have been right.
Polls suggest Houston is poised for a landslide victory, bucking the recent global trend of tossing incumbents.
Part of the victory will be attributable to Tim Houston associating Justin Trudeau with the problems and grievances of Nova Scotia.
All of the parties have made promises around healthcare, affordability, and housing in a province grappling with record growth. Kayla Hounsell, CBC News, Halifax.
That is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team at Information Radio. We are live downtown. It is snowy and white. We're glad to be with you. -7. Abby's going to update that, though, in just a moment. And Abby and I will be happy. The rest of our team will be a little bit annoyed at the snow. I don't know what it's like in your house, but we're certainly into intermittent weather now, aren't we? Well, this hour on the show, we're going to manifest positivity. Manifest was the word of the year, according to the Cambridge Dictionary for 2024. But can you actually manifest good things in your life? What's the positive reasoning behind this trend? And how could this backfire? So stay tuned. We're going to have that conversation. Also, locally, we're going to celebrate and reflect the true meaning of the bison. It's something that they did at the University of Manitoba. So we're going to share that with you. Stay tuned. So let's get to Heather Wells first. She's here with our headlines from our CBC Winnipeg News Centre. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, an expert on the use of force says what was on the minds of Winnipeg police officers before they shot a man Sunday evening will be a key part of the investigation into what happened. Police say the man had stabbed an officer in the throat before officers fired shots at the man. It happened outside a bus shelter at Unicity Shopping Centre. The man later died in hospital. We're going to hear from Ontario's former director of that province's Special Investigations Unit. The mayor of Swan River appreciates the province's help dealing with a drug problem, but says the solutions so far have been piecemeal. Rural regional health authorities are getting $30,000 each to clean up and dispose of needles. Swan River's mayor wants to know how the province instead is going to help rehabilitate people who are addicted to drugs. Those stories and more coming up at 6:30.
All right. Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
So, Heather, before we get to weather and traffic here, because there's nothing urgent, I want to ask you, and you don't have to answer. We can let the guys answer first here, Corey and Abby. But we're about to have an interview about the word of the year from the Cambridge Dictionary. Said it was manifest.
Manifest?
So you can manifest your life, manifest good thing, manifest. What's your gut reaction? Love it? Not sure? Do you use that word?
I don't often use that word.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It just kind of makes me go, huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
Abby, manifest.
I use it in the morning.
Do you?
Yeah, because I I send out that vibe out there, and that's what I want to meet out there. So I'm like, today's going to be a great day. Today's going to be a good day. Today's going to be a beautiful day. And then I just put it out there and let the manifestation happen.
Corey?
My first is like, ugh. I think the word is a little bit overused.
You don't
like
it?
No, I don't like it. I think it kind of puts a little bit too much onus on you to manifest something yourself. And all the things that I've ever manifested for me have been because I've leaned on my community. I think it just puts a lot of pressure on you to just make things happen, and I don't like it.
See, and I'm right up the middle when I think about the four of us, right? We all have different thoughts on this because I've both felt like it has been a power tool in my life, and then I also feel that cringiness, like you're saying, Corey, where it's like, does it put out too much of that? Who is that guy, Heather? Tony Robbins with the big teeth that would, right? Manifest everything, like right? That whole anyone can do anything, and then if you can't, you somehow, are you labeled that you can't?
It reads a little culty to me.
Okay, but wow. Wow, you're really like going to the
I just picture someone in a robe and a beard saying manifest.
I think I get Corey there, because a lot of motivational speakers, and to be motivational speakers, always use that word. It's like overflogged.
Yeah.
You know what? Years ago, it's funny though. They said that there would never be. I really wanted to host at CBC, and at that point, they said they weren't having any co-hosts. And I thought, well, I've been doing this work for a long time. I really enjoy working with Terry. I'm going to keep doing this. And I didn't give up. And I sort of thought about manifesting, imagining myself doing this. And then then it happened. So I feel like there was a little bit of that positive vibe manifestation going on. Others would say, no, you just, worked hard and you were in the right position and you know what I mean? And you earned your role. But I don't know. It's an interesting thing.
Then just use the word make it happen. Make it happen.
But why not manifest?
I love Corey's idea of a guy in a beard with a robe. Is that like Santa manifesting?
He is the ultimate influencer.
Yes. Well, let's see what's going on in the. Thanks, Heather. I know Heather's got to go back to the news center here, but let's see what's happening in what we're supposed to be talking about, which is weather and traffic. Abby.
Well, this time last week, some people were manifesting that they wanted the white stuff, and here it is. We have it now. The white stuff is with us. -7 in the city. Light drifting snow we're noticing in some areas. Today's forecast for Winnipeg calls for mainly cloudy conditions. We do have a slight chance of flurries this morning. Some areas saw fog patches that should be clearing this morning, and then we will notice breezy conditions this morning, though it's going to become calm as you get to the afternoon period. A high for today would get to -6, and then tonight that mainly cloudy condition will continue with light winds across the province. The northern regions will will see mostly cloudy conditions with a few flurries expected, and the highs will be around -8 and -10. We're looking at western Manitoba, the Parkland region, and central region, going all the way to the Red River Valley. We're going to see temperatures also hover near -6 for today. But for Winnipeg today, it's going to be mainly cloudy, a slight chance of that flurries as mentioned, and then we get to a high of -6.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Corey, I think you drove in. What was it like?
It was a little bit snowy on the roads on the way here, especially on those side streets. So just careful there. But in terms of traffic overall, it means the highways. Looks like the worst highways right now are actually in eastern Manitoba right now. Manitoba 511 showing those as partly covered. Here in the city, no major issues to report. If you are on portage around Omens Creek, right there, westbound, you may lose a couple lanes, so heads up there. If you see anything else going on, though, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
Time right now is 6:16, and up first this half hour, the 4th annual Spirit of the Bison was held over the weekend at the University of Manitoba. So it's a day that celebrates Indigenous culture with sport. While honoring the bison, which is, of course, a symbol of respect, pride, and Indigenous identity, it's also a symbol at U of M. On Saturday night, there were several performances by Indigenous dancers and drummers and singers, and that was all between basketball games, Bison's basketball games. Bree Cruz is the Indigenous Achievement and Outreach Lead at the University of Manitoba.
This event is called Spirit of the Bison. So this is our 4th annual that we've hosted here at the University of Manitoba. And what that is we want to bring sport and culture together, specifically the Indigenous culture, and really bring forward that Indigenous spirit of the bison. Being here at the University of Manitoba, we wear the bison, and we really want to bring those Indigenous teachings and the Indigenous culture here with the event. Spirit of the Bison is all around our bison sport games. So we have, normally the bisons play every weekend. And what we've done is, although those games are going on, we wanted to infuse the Indigenous culture in those games going on. And certain things that we have going on during those games is, it's called Head of the Herd. And that's where we have our little mini bisons come in and be, big bisons for the day. So we have young Indigenous athletes that are going to be a part of the team for the day and are going to be able to experience what it means to be a University of Manitoba bison. The national anthem being sung in Indigenous languages. We have Indigenous performers throughout the day, either during our half times or in the concourse of the area. And then we also have Indigenous artisans and organizations that will be here, and an Indigenous athlete meet and greet table as well with our Indigenous bison athletes. Being on Treaty 1 territory, this is the land of Indigenous peoples, and we really want to bring that Indigenous culture forward. We want to show that culture and sport can be together as one. And of course, for our Indigenous youth that are coming here today, seeing Indigenous athletes here and seeing that this is a place where you can either continue your university education as well as continue your university athletics. We really want them to see that this is a place that they can belong in, this is a place they can go to school, a place they can continue their sport journey. And it's also very important for our non-Indigenous folks to see the Indigenous culture, to see the artisans, to hear the national anthem being sung in Indigenous languages, and to see just the amazing accomplishments of Indigenous people here at the University of Manitoba.
That was Bree Cruz speaking about the Spirit of the Bison, a day to celebrate and reflect on the true meaning of the bison. She is the Indigenous Achievement and Outreach Lead at the University of Manitoba. And if you want to see some video of the performances, please go to our website at CBC Manitoba.
This winter, help us make the season kind by supporting Harvest Manitoba. I'm Vince Barletta, CEO of Harvest Manitoba. All it takes is one can of food, $1, or even 1 hour of your time. Join CBC as we donate a day of programming in support of Harvest Manitoba December 6th. Find ways to give to Harvest Manitoba at cbc.ca/kindmb.
So that's coming up quickly, right? That's next Friday already. So hopefully make a date with your radio here and with your television and on your YouTube stream. Light snow and drifting snow in the city. It's -7. And I just want to mention the cold spot in the province right now is Roblin. It's -28. Yep, mine is 28. Bit of music next on CBC here. Catherine Kennedy is out of St. John. She's got a new tune. This one is called Crazy.
Oh, I remember when every little thing you did drove me crazy. Sleeping in late, waking up hazy on a Sunday afternoon. Next to you, but now I wake up at the crack of dawn, waiting for my alarm to turn on. I can't stop my mind from running, so I will get running. Without you by my side. Oh, and wherever you are, I hope that you're still dreaming free. You always somehow did seem to see the world with such curiosity. And all the things I thought I'd never miss. Funny how your mind plays tricks on you. Arguing about which shade of blue. Sometimes space is all you need to see a different you. Oh, and wherever you are, I hope that you're still dreaming free. You always somehow did seem to see the world with such curiosity.
Out of St. John, this artist is Catherine Kennedy. Tune's called Crazy. Oh, I wasn't stepping on that last note, was I? 6:24 a.m. is the time right now. You're on Information Radio here on CBC. And as we were just talking about earlier this half hour on the show, Cambridge Dictionary has put manifest as its 2024 word of the year. So in popular context, it's defined as the process of imagining and achieving something you want. But in the belief that we're doing so, in the belief that if you do that, it will make it more likely to happen. Our question this morning is, does it actually work? And can it actually do some damage? To learn more, Denise Marigold is with us. She's an associate professor in the Department of Social Development Studies at the University of Waterloo, and that's where she teaches a course on positive psychology. And I manifested a great interview with her. We spoke at 6. Good morning.
Good morning.
I highly doubt that. Does the concept of manifesting have any basis in science? Let's get to the central question here.
Yeah, there is some basis, I would say. So first, imagining in great detail what you want, who are you, what are your values, what do you care about, that can be helpful in just kind of clarifying and solidifying what a good direction for you is to go. Secondly, to the extent that you're imagining this outcome, you're also going to be reflecting on where am I now and what might I need to do to get there. So being able to sort of create some steps. And finally, our beliefs do influence our reality to the extent that they influence our behavior. So when we expect some outcome or believe we deserve a positive outcome, we might be more inclined to look for opportunities, seek connections, take risks that we might not otherwise have taken.
To that end, isn't manifesting something the same as visualizing in order to build motivation or goal setting, or do you see a difference?
Yeah, it's definitely a form of that. What it sounds to me from what I've seen with manifesting, it's really just focused on it doesn't matter what it is. You just pick the thing and you will make it happen. But I think in goal setting in a more sort of healthy way, we often think about what's actually a reasonable goal. So you might say you can aim high, but don't forget to aim. What are your strengths and what are your challenges? What are your opportunities? What resources do you have? So think about what is actually a reasonable goal to pursue given where you're at. And even considering other alternatives that might meet my overall needs or wants that maybe is more in my reach.
What's the positive side of a trend like this taking off? Thinking positively, whether you're using the word manifest or not.
Mm-hmm. I think life is hard, and things that anything worth pursuing can be challenging, take a lot of time and effort to bring to fruition, and can be discouraging. So where people can give themselves a sense of hope and agency and positive feelings about it, can be really helpful. That especially that feeling like, okay, there's so many things going on, they're out of my control. What can I do to make it maybe more likely in some way that I'm going to get there?
And what are the downsides of it?
Well, overall, I think one of the downsides with a lot of this kind of self-help stuff is what messages we take about people who are not successful, whether it's at manifesting or enacting some of these other self-help kinds of things. Because we often hear of people who have done this successfully. Those are the big stories we look to for inspiration. We don't hear a lot about the people who have failed to manifest, right? And so just keeping in mind, again, that life is complicated, human behavior is complicated, a lot of things outside our control. So if we're not ultimately successful, we don't want to berate ourselves for that.
Can it also create issues because not everyone's coming at there's such a gap and disparity in terms of wealth and
Yes.
privilege, and that it kind of feels like this could really backfire, where it's very nice to have, a big word where everyone's, taking selfies of themselves glammed up on TikTok, manifesting these best lives. But I just can't imagine, because I am privileged, being without a roof over my head and watching this. I wouldn't just roll my eyes. I'd probably feel a little bit angry about the whole trend.
Oh, yeah. The idea that we have earned our successes implies that we've also earned our failures, which I think is really unfair given where a lot of people are starting out in life. The idea that you can sort of think your way into positive outcomes. When you're starting from a place of privilege, sure. And when you're not, when you're experiencing, deep poverty and oppression, it's a different kind of thing. We love to hear stories about people who have pulled themselves up by their bootstraps and come out of poverty and all these, trauma and that kind of thing and done really well. But those are always things where, people aren't acting alone. It's not just a matter of thinking your way through it.
I do want to end positively. As we inch toward the new year and new goals or resolutions, people start thinking about that new year, fresh start, that whole thing. Do you have any advice for listeners?
Yeah, I would say, it's great to start off by thinking about what is that happy outcome I want to obtain. But if you just fantasize about kind of smoothly attaining that, that's not necessarily the most helpful strategy. So if you can think about what you want, but then take a step back and say, what are some obstacles that I might face in trying to get there? And then make an if-then plan. So if I face this obstacle, then I will try this strategy, or then I will look to this resource, right? And just sort of being a little prepared for the reality you might face. And so when you get there, you're not just, face this obstacle, you're not just discouraged and give up, but you realize I've got options here. I've got different ways I can move.
Thank you very much for the interview this morning. Appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Denise Marigold teaches a course on positive psychology at the University of Waterloo. Quick traffic note before the news. Alfred Avenue, there's a fire. So Alfred's closed in the 600 block to all traffic. That's part of McGregor. Also, Mackenzie's closed between Burroughs and Aberdeen. So please plan alternate routes. Your news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it is -7. Temperature's not moving a whole lot today. A high of -6. Mostly cloudy, just a slight chance of flurries in Winnipeg for Tuesday. An expert on use of force says what was on the minds of Winnipeg police officers before they shot a man Sunday evening will be a key part of the investigation into what happened. Police say the man had stabbed an officer in the throat before officers fired shots at the man. It happened outside a bus shelter at Unicity Shopping Centre. The man later died in hospital. Winnipeg police won't say if the officer who was stabbed was involved in the shooting. Former Ontario Special Investigations Unit Director Ian Scott says what officers knew about the stabbing will be important.
Did they witness it personally, or did they receive communications to that effect? Because that would clearly ratchet up their sense of imminent danger as this fellow with a knife approached them.
Video circulating widely on social media shows officers shooting the man, but police say it doesn't capture the whole incident. Manitoba's police watchdog, the Independent Investigation Unit, is investigating. Some charitable organizations in Winnipeg worry the Canada Post strike will put a dent in donations they need. These charities rely on donors, many of whom send their checks by mail. But the postal strike has brought mail delivery to a halt right across the country. Mary Beth Taylor at the Winnipeg Foundation wants donors to give in other ways, like online.
We're using social media to push out the message for the entire charitable sector, not just the Winnipeg Foundation. We're wanting donors to go online, learn what the charities are looking for this holiday season, and make online gifts.
Now, the Canada Post strike is having other unusual impacts. Emily Wallstrom is struggling to get her father's ashes. Dennis Wallstrom died a month ago in Surrey, BC. He grew up in Manitoba and wants to be buried here. Emily Wallstrom says she was told the parcel containing his cremated remains would arrive at her Montreal home on November 20th, but that changed when Canada Post workers went on strike. She says her father's remains are now in limbo at a Canada Post facility in Richmond, BC.
Very undignified for someone that we love to be in a warehouse somewhere collecting dust, and we have no idea if Canada Post is going to take on that responsibility to ship human remains. There needs to be some accountability.
In a statement, Canada Post says it sympathizes with those affected. It says once the strike ends, secured mail and parcels will be delivered on a first-in, first-out basis. Wallstrom says the family may have to postpone her father's burial until the ground thaws in the spring. The mayor of Swan River says more police officers and a used needle pickup program are helpful. But what Lance Jacobson really wants from the province is a plan to help rehabilitate people addicted to drugs. Rural regional health authorities are getting $30,000 each to clean up and dispose of needles. The move was spurred by complaints of needle litter in Swan River. Mayor Lance Jacobson says it's helping a bit.
There is a dance studio that is for young children to come and do their dance recitals and practices. And often they come there, and that building in the front entrance is full of littered needles.
Right now, needles are only being handed out in Swan River through Public Health. A nonprofit group stopped distributing them, and the emergency room at the local hospital stopped handing out needles temporarily because of the litter problem. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump is pledging a 25% tariff on Canadian products until border issues are resolved. Trump's post on his Truth Social website last night says the tariff on products from Canada and Mexico will be one of the first things he does after taking office in January. He says crime and drugs in the U.S. are at levels never seen before as thousands of people pour through Canada and Mexico. Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland and Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc both say they will continue to discuss border security issues with the incoming administration. You can hear more national and international news on World Report at 7. A big night for Connor Hellebuck and Alex Iafallo.
Score! Iafallo off a brilliant play by Kupari, and we are tied at 1.
Alex Iafallo in the first period on TSN as the Winnipeg Jets take down the Minnesota Wild 4-1. It was Iafallo's first of 2 goals, his second goal coming as his 100th NHL goal.
Grass and Bear did a great job getting there and getting it deep, so it's a nice play. I just had to shoot it, so we're going to keep doing that and keep be in the right spots, and got to help out Bucky. Has some pretty big saves out there, so.
Connor Hellebuck did make 43 saves. It was the league's top goalie's 15th win in 17 starts. The Jets stay on the road, heading to the West Coast now in Los Angeles, and that is a late start. 9 o'clock tomorrow night is puck drop.
Ew.
You can find more Manitoba news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Sorry, my mic was on.
Oh, sorry, I didn't even hear you. What did you say?
Well, when you said it's a late start, 9 o'clock, I said, ew.
Yeah, I know.
For hockey fans, that's a little late, right? All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells in our news center today. All right, Abby, let's get to this regional forecast on this cold, snowy morning.
Yeah, let's take her from Winnipeg, -7, still light snow and drifting snow in some areas. Today's forecast for Winnipeg and the Red River Valley, we're going to see mainly cloudy skies with a slight chance of flurries this morning. Some fog patches spotted here and there should be clearing this morning, while it will be more like a breezy condition for the rest of the morning, which will become as you get into the afternoon. The highs for today will reach -6, and then for tomorrow, another mainly cloudy day. Brandon and the Westman region sitting at -23 at this time. Clear conditions you're seeing, though the forecast for the region calls for some clouds to roll in by late morning, with fog patches spotted earlier on to be clearing off, and then the winds will stay light. The highs will only get to -6, though it's going to feel colder with the wind chill factored in, and we also have a risk of frostbite in the forecast. Modern and the central region at -12 at this point. Cloudy skies you're seeing. Forecast calls for mainly cloudy conditions with a slight chance of flurries this morning. Fog patches will clear this morning, and the winds will ease by the noon period. We're going to see highs around -6. For Dauphin and the Parkland region, we're looking at temperatures sitting around -16 at this point. The forecast calls for more like a mix of sun and clouds and a slight chance of flurries in the forecast. It will remain chilly with a high of -11. A look at Gimli and the Interlake region. We're seeing temperatures around -7 for this time. The Interlake region will be mostly cloudy. We have a slim chance of flurries and fog patches clearing this morning. Then the wind will become a breezy near the noon period, and highs will be around -6. For the Pa and Flin Flon, we're looking at temperatures around -13. Light snow falling at this point. We will see highs around -8. And if we move up to up north in Thompson, currently -11. Light snow at this time. Also, it will be breezy at some point, and you see highs around -8. For the north in Churchill, it is also -11 with cloudy conditions. The forecast stays, it's going to stay cloudy for most of the day. We do have a slim chance of flurries in the forecast, and the highs would only get to -10. But right now, Winnipeg, we are at -7, heading to a high of -6.
It's kind of chilled across the province. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Let's go to traffic and what's going on in the commute, Corey.
Yeah, start here in the city. No major issues right now, but if you do drive down westbound down Portage, you might notice that right on Omens Creek there between Strathcona and Empress going westbound on Portage, you lose your middle lane and your curb lane, and that's actually expected to be ongoing until April 25th, so until the spring. So that's going to be a bottleneck for the majority of the winter, so just heads up there. That just started yesterday. Outside the city, actually, just got a call from Raven on the commuter line. She says Highway 20 just north of Dauphin, sheer ice right now, so do be careful. Looking at Manitoba 501 right now, also it seems like the most covered highways right now are in eastern Manitoba right now, but also Highway 10 through Riding Mountain, also looking pretty treacherous. If you see anything else going on, though, give me a call. Be like Raven. Tell me what you're seeing out there. 204-788-3093.
Corey, let's reflect for just a minute on the Donald Trump tariffs. Heather was mentioning in the news. Of course, everyone's talking about it. National news. This half hour, Christelle Ramlakan in a second is going to weigh in from business. We have an interview. You've been reflecting sort of on how that could impact Manitoba.
Yeah, well, I did. As soon as I saw the news last night when it broke in the evening, I was like, hey, what could this mean here? And I just started looking at some of our biggest exports, canola.
Yeah.
It's going to be, I think it's like over $2 billion that we export, not necessarily all to the U.S., but they are a big buyer. So I want to know what that could mean for canola farmers. I'm sure there's lots of people today waking up being like, holy smokes, what's this going to mean for my industry?
If it goes through, yeah. So 25%, big number.
Big number.
So you were saying canola. I was thinking about even tourism, even trucking, like in terms of if there's less goods, you know, how deep could that get? And of course, lumber has longstanding been a question. I know in Manitoba, of course, it's not as big of an issue, but we have in the past had some lumber companies here. We have some left.
Or I'm feeling for that that startup company that's thinking about expand or trying to sell to the U.S. maybe starting in the new year, something like that. I'm thinking, now do I? What do I do?
So we have calls out to or outreaching rather to the Chamber of Commerce for Manitoba. So we'll get their perspective if we get them on the air this morning. But you can weigh in. I just want to invite people to weigh in here as well. Thanks, Corey. 788-3205 is our listener line. Anytime, 788-3205. So let's turn now to business news with Christelle Ramlakan, who's here to talk tariffs. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Marcy.
So the big news, U.S. President Donald Trump is threatening, that's why I was just couching this, it's not a certainty, but he's threatening 25% tariff on products from Canada and Mexico, I should add, of course. How do you think that could affect Canadian businesses, just to widen the lens here?
Yeah, and like you guys were mentioning there, the U.S. is the most critical market for Canada and Mexico, so it could hurt Canadian businesses that sell to the U.S. So if there's a tariff on goods, it will make it more expensive for Americans to import, and then U.S. businesses could hold off. So Donald Trump says he wants Canada and Mexico to address what he calls drugs and migrants crossing borders, or he might impose these punishing economic sanctions. But it's unclear whether Trump actually intends to proceed with this idea. He has used trade threats as negotiating tactics in the past, and he did end up imposing tariffs on Canada on steel and aluminum in his first term before the countries could negotiate an exemption. Now, Canada's number one export to the United States is oil, and a 25% levy on oil would make things, of course, more expensive for them, which is the opposite to Trump's campaign promise to address the cost of living. Now, Perrin Beatty is the former president and CEO of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, and he says Canada should address underlying concerns of the incoming Trump administration.
But what we need to do is to, in a very rational way, have a clear plan, mobilize the Canadian business community, Canadian premiers, Canadian mayors, and others to reach out across the border. We need to address the issues that are fundamentally important to the Americans, and we need to recognize that it's not going to be business as usual. That, we have a president who, instead of seeing this as being the special relationship between Canada and the United States, sees the relationship much more on a transactional basis.
Now, it's unclear whether Trump might exempt certain products, such as oil, but, this is the first time in years he's threatened Canada specifically, and certainly the first time he's threatened a tariff this large on every product.
Let's stay on this subject for a moment. How are Canadian consumers feeling after the U.S. election overall?
Well, consumer confidence is declining. New polling suggests that many Canadians are worried the economy could suffer under a Donald Trump presidency. So every week, Nanos Research and Bloomberg publish a snapshot of consumer confidence. And for most of the year, the numbers have been moving in a positive direction. People were feeling better with interest rates falling. Now, before the U.S. election, just over a quarter of people surveyed had an optimistic view, but that has fallen to 18%. Nick Nanos is the chief data scientist and the founder of the polling firm. He says that drop is meaningful, and of course, as we're seeing here, tariffs are a major worry.
What we have to worry about is that if consumer confidence starts to drop, that Canadians stop spending money. right? That they delay a purchase and it becomes almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's going to be really important to watch where consumer confidence goes in the next couple of weeks, because we're getting into a big spending period with the holiday season. So this might have a negative impact on Christmas shopping and holiday shopping.
So that wouldn't be good for Canadian businesses either. But, Canada is not the only country feeling this way. Other countries, including Germany, France, the UK, China, and India, are also feeling a similar sentiment.
Let's switch gears here before we look at the markets. The beef between rapper Drake and Kendrick Lamar is turning into, I understand, a corporate feud.
Yeah, so Drake has filed court documents alleging that Universal Music used deceptive business practices to turn his rival Kendrick Lamar's diss track, Not Like Us, into a mega hit. So both rappers are signed to the same label, and Drake is claiming that Universal used things like bots and pay-for-play to artificially inflate streams. Now, the spat between the two artists dates back more than a decade, but earlier this year, the stars went back and forth, as we know, releasing diss tracks. So Universal, the world's largest music company, is the parent of both Lamar's label, Interscope Records, and Drake's label, Republic Records. Now, Universal says the suggestion that it would do anything to undermine any of its artists is offensive and untrue. The company says it employs the highest ethical practices in its marketing and promotional campaigns. And Drake's lawyers are seeking information to help them build claims of deceptive business practices. Now, Drake hasn't sued Universal, but requests for this kind of information can lay the groundwork for an eventual suit.
Let's have a quick look at the markets, Crystal.
In Europe, stocks are lower as investors assess the implications of these tariffs. Germany, the UK, and France are all down. In Asia, markets are mixed. Japan is down. Shanghai is down. Hong Kong is up. Oil is up 68 cents to $69.62 U.S. per barrel. Gold is up $6.30 to $2,630.60 U.S. per ounce. And the dollar really got hit with that tariff news. It's down more than half a cent to 71 cents U.S.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thanks, Marcy.
That's Crystal Ramlicam with Business News. We'll have more, by the way, on the tariffs coming up this half hour, proposed tariff coming up this half hour on the show. Right now, it is 6:47 a.m. Good morning. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team here at CBC. Well, we're getting into the holiday season, and while it is one of joy, it can also be one where you can feel grief as well, especially if you've lost loved ones. Don Amaro wrote a song after the loss of his own brother-in-law. He said he wasn't sure how to handle the grief, and eventually he turned it into this. This is called What Were You Thinking?
What were you thinking when you put those stars up in the sky? A perfect backdrop for a perfect night. What were you thinking when you made the ocean meet the sand? I remember that beach where I first held her hand. What were you thinking? What were you thinking? I don't know how and I don't know why. It all just happened in the blink of an eye. I can't go back, but God, I wish I could. I'd stop that plane from leaving town. I wished you would have warned me it was going down. But here I am, I'm just saying. What were you thinking when you moved the earth and your hands made her? Did you know her fate and how much I hurt? What were you thinking when I held her close and we said goodbye? Did you know it then? It was our last time. I don't know how and I don't know why. It all just happened in the blink of an eye. I can't go back, but God, I wish I could. I'd stop that plane from leaving town. I wished you would have warned me it was going down. But here I am, I'm just saying. You moved just move here and save my heart. What were you thinking? What were you thinking? I don't know how and I don't know why. It all just happened in the blink of an eye. I can't go back, but God, I wish I could. I'd get on that plane, I'd go with her. I'd hold her hand while we leave this earth. But here I am, I'm just saying, forgive me, God, it's you I'm blaming. What were you thinking?
Don Amero's song about dealing with grief called What Were You Thinking after the loss of his brother-in-law. In case you're wondering, the tune is, of course, about someone losing their life in a plane crash, as you can hear, but that was used as a metaphor to be dealing with grief. If you love Don Amero's voice, songs and stories full of sadness, emotion, and tons of joy as well, you might want to be checking out his show coming up on December 6th. This year, Amero Little Christmas is happening at the Burton Cummings Theatre. It is 9 minutes to 7. As I mentioned, I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team here at InfoRad. It is -7 in the city. We got light snow and drifting snow in Winnipeg, clear in Brandon, really crisp, -23. Thompson, light snow and -11 degrees. Well, as I mentioned, we have more tariff talk now. Donald Trump has now warned on his very first day in office he might impose punishing economic sanctions all across North America. He's highlighted Mexico and Canada and slapping a 25% import tariff on all imports coming into the U.S. And let's talk about what that could mean. We just had some analysis from Crystalie Ramlakan in our business report, but Alex Bellingal is with us now, who covers federal politics for the Toronto Star. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Marcy.
So just to start with your sense of this, what do you make of this proposed tariff?
Yeah, well, it's it's almost like knowing what we know about Trump. Potentially, the opening gambit in some sort of negotiation, or like the big bluff bet on the poker table or something. And you're trying to see how others react, or negotiate down to something smaller, and you start high or whatever. But it's a very serious threat to the Canadian economy, that I'm sure your listeners just heard. Businesses will be freaking out. Politicians will be freaking out. We know that Trudeau scrambled to get Trump on the phone last night to talk to him about this as quickly as possible. It's a very serious thing, and I think it kind of dropped like a bombshell last night, even though it might not be entirely unexpected given that it's Trump we're talking about. But just the stakes for jobs in Canada, the Canadian economy, major sectors like the fossil fuel sector and auto parts and car manufacturing and cement and steel and everything. Massive stakes, huge deal, and I think it's going to dominate the political discussion until we figure out what's actually going to happen.
You mentioned Trudeau. We are reporting that here at CBC that he was on the phone with Trump last night. What else have we heard from Canadian politicians and others about this so far?
I think the other significant thing is that, premiers are now calling, and I'm not sure about Premier Canoe in Manitoba, though I know for sure that Doug Ford in Ontario, Legault, and Fury in Newfoundland are calling for an urgent summit of First Ministers to have like a coordinated Team Canada approach to kind of have a united front to deal with this. So that's kind of one of the big things. Others kind of urging the government to really take this seriously and confront this head on, given the stakes. So I think we're going to see a lot of that moving forward, and a lot of pressure on them to talk Trump down from this.
Let's turn our attention to something else and back to Ottawa, because there's another big story, and listeners have been writing like crazy about this one because it affects their pocketbooks. Yeah. Where do things stand with the government's plan for this GST holiday that's supposed to start on December 14th?
So it's a bit uncertain. Like, they have to pass that in legislation. And as I'm sure a lot of people know, the federal parliament, the House of Commons, has been basically paralyzed for weeks because of a conservative filibuster where they're trying to force the government to hand over documents related to this green tech agency that they allege is kind of riddled with corruption, and they want the cops to get these unredacted documents the government isn't handing them over unredacted, and so there's this standoff that's basically gummed up the flow of everything through Parliament, and so including legislation. And so to pass these affordability things, the GST holiday and the $250 checks they want to hand out, they have to pass legislation. And so they need one of the opposition parties in the minority parliament to play ball with that and at least pause the filibuster so a window opens so that they can pass it. And what we're hearing from the NDP now is that they're cool with the GST holiday, but they want the $250 checks to go to more people. So not just people who worked in 2023 and made less than $150,000, but also retirees, students, people with unemployment, people with disabilities who might not have been working. The Bloc Québécois has a similar demand. They want retirees to get it. And now we know at least one Liberal MP kind of also shares those concerns and wants the checks to go to more people. So, absent a dancing partner to open that window to get these going through, they can't pass it. So there's a bit of uncertainty about where this is going and how that's going to land and in what form it'll get passed and when.
Alex, thank you very much for your time and analysis this morning. We appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me.
That's Alex Bellingal. He covers federal politics for the Toronto Star. Now, Alex was mentioning there that the premiers now are mobilizing and talking about how to respond to the what has come out, these proposed tariffs, 25% tariffs across the board on Canadian imports to the States, I guess Canadian exports from here. But also, I want to mention that in Ottawa, also for meetings, are the Chambers of Commerce getting together. So we've just confirmed that Chuck Davidson of the Manitoba Chamber of Commerce will join us live on Information Radio after 8 this morning. He is in Ottawa. He's meeting with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce right now, and they're working, he said, told our Corey, that they're working to pressure federal and provincial governments to make sure this tariff does not happen. So Corey Funk, of course, our director, just off the phone, confirming that Chuck Davidson will join us with his Manitoba Chamber point of view on this coming up after 8. I'm being careful not to use the word threat. I keep saying the proposed tariff, but many are viewing this as a threat. And as you heard Alex analyzing, could it be the opening statement to something to negotiate down what he's proposing, 25%, the president-elect? Or is this something that we're going to see come January 20th? So we'll talk all about what's at stake here as we continue the program. That's the big news this morning. There is a lot of other news as well that is significant and developing. Heather Wells is in with our headlines at 3 minutes to 7.
Good morning. Well, an expert on the use of force says what was on the minds of Winnipeg police officers before they shot a man Sunday evening will be a key part of the investigation into what happened. Police say the man had stabbed an officer in the throat before officers fired shots at the man. The man later died in hospital, so we'll hear more on that coming up. The mayor of Swan River says more police officers and a used needle pickup program are helpful, but what Lance Jacobson really wants from the province is a plan to help rehabilitate people who are addicted to drugs. Rural regional health authorities are getting $30,000 each to clean up and dispose of needles. We'll hear more from Lance Jacobson coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
In the forecast here, light snow and drifting snow in Winnipeg. It's -7. We'll be around -6 for the day, so not much change. And we do have a chance that we'll have a few flurries out there. There could also be fog patches. We're not seeing that really downtown. But call us if you have any issues. 788-3093 on the commute. Now, I don't have an update on that fire that was happening. Corey, I'm just looking at you for the name of the street for that fire earlier. I'm not certain. Alfred. Thank you, Corey. So I'm not certain whether or not that is still blocking streets in that area, but please give us a call. We do understand that right now you are still needing to be rerouting around. So 788-3093. Also should mention that Portage Avenue West, you're going to lose a couple of lanes. This is right around Omens Creek as they begin that big restructuring project, and that's going to last through March. So give us a call if anything else on your commute is an issue, whether it's icy underfoot or if you're having a snowy bike in maybe. Most of the drive seems to be wet so far. In the next hour of Information Radio, she says she won the neighbor lottery. We're going to hear from a Winnipeg resident about why she says she has the best neighbor ever. And we're asking you for your neighbor stories. They're coming in already on Facebook, so we'll have some lovely conversations about that. Plus, to something serious. We're going to mark Domestic Violence Awareness Month with a story from a Winnipeg woman who shares her story of escaping abuse and the journey that she took to pull through it and thrive, and why she wants to speak out to strengthen others. Stay tuned for a feature interview.
Today on The Current. A little bit south It is beautiful in the prairies today. It's also very, very cold. I'm in Saskatoon, where I'm talking to the author Guy Vanderheg. I'm visiting a pool producing champion divers, and we're looking at how this city is tackling homelessness, all on a special edition of The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Marcia Young. Donald Trump is already making international waves as he prepares to take office. The U.S. president-elect is proposing hefty tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China. He is vowing to implement the new tariffs on day one of his presidency. The CBC's Richard Madden joins me now from Washington. And Richard, what can you tell us?
Yeah, the incoming president posted it late last night, and as you noted, the reaction has ricocheted around the world. Now, Trump says he'll slap a whopping 25% tariffs on all imports coming in from Canada and Mexico on the first day of his presidency, until, he says, illegal immigration and drug flow into the U.S. is under control. He's also vowing an additional 10% tariff on China, blaming Beijing for the fentanyl trade. Now, these tariffs would have a crushing impact on all economies. For Canada, it could decimate the oil, lumber, produce, and auto industries, to name a few. But how he would implement it is unclear. Trump would first off have to declare some kind of economic emergency that would likely face an immediate court challenge. And then there are questions on how he could order tariffs on products covered under the trilateral NAFTA or USMCA deal. But for now, neither Trump or his transition team has yet to explain their strategy.
What is Trump's camp saying about these new tariffs?
Well, it's a follow-through on what we heard Trump promise during the campaign, but tying it to illegal immigration on the southern border far exceeds apprehensions on the Canadian side. And some Canadian officials I spoke to are surprised Trump would lump in immigration problems to Canada. But a lot of experts say this strategy is classic Trump. It's the art of the deal. He's using tariffs as leverage to get what he wants and steer the conversation to his priorities, immigration and drug trade. Here's Republican strategist Matthew Bartlett.
This is a classic Donald Trump move, to propose one thing and to be happy by settling on something else, whether it is a different enforcement of trade, whether it is having different governments pay attention to the critical issues that he wants.
So while Ottawa looks to either smooth things over or retaliate with tariffs of their own, Trump's post may be a preview of what's in store. It's going to take some delicate diplomacy, but in this case, Ottawa has 2 months to figure it out.
Thanks, Richard.
Thanks.
The CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. A tariff imposed by Canada's biggest trading partner would be devastating for Canadian business, but economists are warning some of that pain would be felt south of the border too. Senior business correspondent Peter Armstrong is here to break it down for us. And Peter, how will this affect Canadian industry?
Look, Marcia, it's important to remember we spent much of the first Trump administration trying to figure out what was bluster, what was a threat, and what was real. And in the end, I think the thing that we learned is that it was all a negotiation tactic. Remember, a tariff is just a fancy word for a tax. So in this case, U.S. manufacturers would have to pay a 25%, let's call it a levy, on all Canadian imports. And it's a long list of stuff we import into the United States. $421 billion worth of goods every year of oil and cars and car parts and machinery and grains. You know, U.S. trade experts say a 25% tariff would mean a $210 billion tax increase on American manufacturers on day one of a Trump administration. There's another report out there that says even a 10% tariff would cost the typical American family like $2,600 a year. So the impacts of these would be sweeping on both sides of the border. Here's Drew Dilkins, the mayor of Windsor, Ontario.
The impact certainly is not just to my country and my city and my region. It also stands to have a huge impact on workers in Detroit and Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky.
So what now?
Look, I think it's important to sort of recognize what that leverage will be. What is the American administration looking for? And of course, the big word that's going to become really important in our lexicon in the next couple of weeks is exemptions. Who's going to get exemptions? What do they look like? How do they get them?
All right. Thank you so much, Peter.
You bet.
The CBC's Peter Armstrong with me in studio. The European Union is urging Israel and Hezbollah to sign the U.S.-backed ceasefire and get the deal done. An Israeli official told Reuters news agency Israel's security cabinet will likely approve the text later today. The EU's top diplomat, Joseph Borrell, is urging Lebanese officials to do the same.
There is not an excuse for not implementing a ceasefire. Otherwise, Lebanon will fall apart.
Officials say the deal will require Israeli troops to withdraw from southern Lebanon. Then Lebanese troops will instead patrol the border region, which is a Hezbollah stronghold. That could make it possible for 60,000 Israelis to return to their homes in northern Israel. Ukraine's Air Defense Force says Russia launched 188 drones into its country in an overnight blitz. The Air Force describes it as a record number of drones deployed in a single attack. It says 17 regions of the country were targeted. There were no immediate reports of deaths or injuries. The Air Force says most of the drones were intercepted, but some apartment buildings and parts of the national power grid were damaged. Today, one of Canada's most notorious killers is asking to be granted parole. Paul Bernardo is serving a life sentence for the kidnapping, torture, and murder of 2 Ontario teens in the 1990s. This is the third time he is asking to be released on parole. As Thomas Daigle reports, Bernardo will be hearing directly from his victims' families.
We don't take anything for granted to make sure that he doesn't get out.
As the longtime lawyer for the families of Kristen French and Leslie Mahaffey, Tim Danson is still fighting to ensure the girl's murderer remains locked up.
The law needs to be changed in the sense that even with someone like Paul Bernardo, they have to go through this every 2 years. It's really gut-wrenching for them.
Today, he's appearing in a Quebec prison with Leslie's mother, Debbie Mahaffey, as she delivers her victim impact statement directly to Bernardo. Kristen's mother, Donna French, will speak by video link after the parole board initially barred the families from attending in person and then denied their request to delay the hearing. The panel will consider whether the designated dangerous offender should be allowed outside the medium security institution. All of it more than 30 years after Bernardo raped and murdered his victims in southern Ontario with the help of his then-wife, Carla Homolka. The last time Bernardo requested parole in 2021, the board said he still poses a high risk. Thomas Daigle, CBC News, Toronto.
Grocery prices, especially meat prices, are still rising. Beef prices in particular are reaching historic levels and are likely to stay that way. Business reporter Kyle Bax explains why.
Jim Jackson packs up ground beef ready for the display case at Cut Right Meats. The butcher shop has operated in Calgary for more than 50 years. This year, the price tags keep rising.
I've been working here quite a while, and probably the all-time high I've ever seen.
Beef prices have soared to historic highs, not only in stores, but on farms, too.
We are at record prices.
Brenna Grant is with Canfax, a beef statistics firm. Grant says cattle prices are between 45 and 65% higher than the 5-year average.
Globally, we've got a growing population, a growing middle class, and they want more protein. And it's not just beef, it's pork and poultry as well.
The supply of beef in the country is dwindling as many ranchers scale back their operations. They have faced rising expenses in recent years, including for feed because of drought conditions.
And when you have fewer cows a couple years later, you're going to have higher beef prices.
Ellen Goddard is an agricultural economist at the University of Alberta. Customer demand for beef remains high, she says, because it's often the most desirable at the meat counter.
It's the top end of the meat. It's the high quality. Beef is the Cadillac.
For Jackson, he's cut his margins to help keep prices in check.
Our profit at the end of the day is less. I don't want to gouge customers. We're just doing our best.
So far, the sticker shock at grocery stores isn't scaring away customers, although some are picking up smaller portions. Kyle Bax, CBC News, Calgary.
Canada Post workers across the country are still on strike. But who can resist a request from the big man in red? Not Happy Valley Goose Bay Union President Kyle Decker.
We were reached out to by one of Santa's elves, and they were worried that they weren't going to receive the Santa letters. So he asked for a favor, and we were happy to help to try and get the kids what they want for Christmas.
Letters addressed to Santa at his famous HOHO postal code can be dropped off at the local post office. Decker says volunteers will see to it that Santa gets his mail. But when it comes to delivering presents, that is still up to Santa and his team of reindeer. We are now into day 12 of the strike, and Canada Post says it has made limited progress with the union at the negotiating table. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime. CBCnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. We're live downtown. Snow on the ground, and it is cold across the province. Thanks for joining us on CBC. This is Information Radio, 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube, and on social media, where you're writing to us. They live on Belmont, in McGregor, in Old St. Vitalin, and St. Boniface. You're writing to us about your best neighbors ever. And we have a lovely story that's prompted all of this, so stay tuned for the story and some of the comments that you're sharing today. I love that. In addition, this hour on the program, we were just hearing about Santa Claus and how some help for the elves or getting those letters in the mail that kids might be writing to Santa. But what about the checks in the mail? Will they arrive on time? We're going to find out how local charities here are being impacted by the Canada Post strike. And we have a feature interview coming up at 10 to 8. November is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. We're going to hear one Winnipeg woman's story of escaping abuse. She says when she shares it, she feels stronger, and she wants to pass that along to others. And so stay tuned for that feature interview. Right now to other stories and headlines with Heather Walls.
Good morning. Well, a former police chief in BC says the latest police shooting in Winnipeg is more proof officers here need body cameras. A man was shot and killed by police outside Unicity Mall on Sunday. Police say the suspect had stabbed an officer in the throat. Former West Vancouver Police Chief Cash Heed says the video might not tell the full story, and he says officers will have to justify their use of lethal force. Some Winnipeg charities are starting to feel the squeeze as the Canada Post strike continues into its second week. Donations are often sent to charities by mail. We'll hear from Harvest Manitoba in our next local news at 7:30.
All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Abby, Yummy, it is holiday feeling weather. You and I are happy.
Yep, we have the white stuff outside. It's going to be cloudy today, and it's going to be cold in most of the regions. We're going to be seeing a slight chance of flurries in most areas. Currently, Winnipeg, actually, we are at -7. The forecast for the city, mainly cloudy conditions. We do have a slight chance of flurries in the forecast this morning. Some fog patches reported here and there. That should be clearing this morning. It will be breezy, becoming calm as you get to the afternoon period, and we're going to be seeing highs around -6. And then for tonight, mostly cloudy conditions will continue across the province. We're looking at this mainly cloudy day ahead. Not to say we won't see sunny breaks here and there, particularly in the Westman area, though there's a slight chance of flurries also in the forecast, and temperatures in the region cooler than seasonal for this time of the year. Normal for this time of the year in Westman is around -5, but for today, Brandon is going to be touching -16. And we're going to see that similar condition for the Parkland region, Central, Red River Valley. That's what it looks like. Up north, Thompson and Churchill seeing light snow this time, and it's chilly. We're going to see temperatures around -10. Right now, Winnipeg, we're at -7. We're only going to drop to -6.
Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Corey, the commute.
Yeah, a few things to look out for here in the city. This is a new one. Fermor and St. Mary's Road, there's been a collision, and it's actually knocked down the traffic signal pole. Now the signals are flashing red in all directions, so you can expect, as you can imagine, some delays. People treat that as a four-way stop, so just be careful going through there as well. All morning, Alfred Avenue, part of it has been closed for a fire, the 600 block, so that's from Parr to McGregor. Mackenzie is also closed between Burroughs and Aberdeen, so just heads up there as well. Hearing about slippery highways just north of Dauphin, and that's Highway 20, heard from Raven. Very, very icy. Poor conditions as well, Highway 10 through Riding Mountain. Also, Manitoba 511 shows poor conditions in general, particularly in eastern Manitoba this morning if you're hitting the highways. So if you have any updates for me on anything I just talked about or anything new, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number 204-788-3093.
Who doesn't love a good neighbor story, Corey Funk?
Oh, I love neighbors.
Right? Mm-hmm. And so it is with the snow down and everybody shoveling out there, you start to see people creep out and really help each other. Mm-hmm. You know, it's kind of the time of year. Yep. We have a wonderful story coming up at 7:40 with someone who's celebrating their neighbor. So we thought, well, let's ask the listeners. And as you can imagine, pages and pages
neighbors are the best.
Comments coming in from you. So let's just share a few of these. You can call us about your best neighbor ever if you think you've got them. Where, why, what do they do? What's the relationship? Or you can write on Facebook, which is my Marcy Marcusa page. That's where these comments are coming from. So here we go with a few. Squirrely Q said, when we were kids, we lived on Belmont and McGregor in West K. There were 5 kids and the lady next door was from France. She was petite. She had this cute accent. She loved to make us delicate crepes Suzette. I moved on to Cabana and St. Bien downtown and there was no front street. So I guess there was a worry there. She wouldn't have that lovely neighbor. But there were the Vurios. Their kids had yard parties. They were welcoming. They made my new world all so much easier. Thank you to Richard Vurio. So people shouting each other out. Kathleen Noel Black says, Mr. Arthur Manuel, I was 5 when I first met him. My best friend until he died. I was about 12 when he died. He taught me about flowers and plants and stamps and coins and the First World War. We watched TV together. He died when he was 80. Don't you love that?
Aww.
Yeah. My Dito and Bob actually on Dufferin Avenue upstairs had a neighbor named Joe, and he used to come down. I have those kind of memories as a kid with him teaching us about things. I love that. And finally, I'm just going to share one more so we don't, we save some of these for later as well. This is a bit of a longer entry, but I think this is lovely. Sandy Buse Fraser said, I'm going to tell a story of my Nan's neighbors, Bee and Lionel. They lived across the back lane from each other for over 60 years. Growing up, they were like an aunt and uncle to us kids. They shared a newspaper subscription. So my grandparents got it in the morning, then they'd walk it across, right? And then they got to read it in the afternoon. And then Sandy's reflecting on garden vegetables, baked goods going back and forth, attending fowl suppers, all those neighborly things.
Yeah.
And she says Lionel always had a candy in his pocket for us. And when my grandmother passed away, they offered so much support for my Nan living alone. And when my Nan moved to assisted living, my brother bought her house, and now you still see them shuffling across the lane to share a drink and have a chat. Isn't that lovely?
Neighbors are the best. They just they're what make a neighborhood a neighborhood. It's the best.
788-3205 or write to us on Facebook. Well, with the end of the year now just around the corner, some people might be thinking about making a charitable donation. The bonus is helping out a worthy cause, of course, while getting a tax receipt. But as you've been hearing in Heather's headlines this morning, the season of giving has become a little more complicated because of the ongoing Canada Post strike. Harvest Manitoba says many donors help the charity by sending checks through the mail. As well, 30% of their donations are a result of direct mail marketing. Here, once again, in case you missed the story, is CEO Vince Barletta.
Well, it's a big impact to charities like Harvest Manitoba all across the country. During the holiday season, organizations like ours raise half or more of all their revenue for the year during the holidays. So it makes a huge impact when there's anything that potentially cuts in to our holiday fundraising. Direct mail is a huge part of how we raise money during the holidays, and the postal strike has the potential to have a huge impact. Well, at this point in time, we're about 2 weeks behind where we would like to be in terms of our direct mail program. Over the holiday season, Harvest Manitoba will mail out over 100,000 pieces of mail across the city of Winnipeg and other parts of Manitoba. So either those mail pieces are sitting on people's desks at home and they can't mail the checks back, or they're sitting at the post office waiting to get delivered. Certainly our online donations are up, but it's not completely replacing those checks which come in. For a lot of organizations, the money that's raised during the holiday isn't just for the holiday. It's money that's used all year round to support the work of our organization. And so if holiday fundraising is not successful, when organizations like Harvest are planning our activities for the year ahead, it could be a real challenge if those funds aren't there for us to carry our work in the 2025.
Harvest Manitoba CEO Vince Barletta there. Now, the Winnipeg Foundation is Canada's oldest community foundation, and last year the charity distributed roughly $85 million to our community. Mary Beth Taylor is Vice President of Community Generosity for the Winnipeg Foundation and with us via Zoom. Hi there.
Hi, Marcy. Good morning.
Good morning. So you were hearing Vince there obviously talking about, what's a big problem. How do you think the postal strike could affect you guys?
Well, we're more worried about the entire charitable sector, to be honest. As Vince said, this is the giving season. And this is when a lot of charities have their direct mail campaigns. Also, donors are in the spirit of giving. And so this is when a lot of revenue is received by the charitable sector.
How are you trying to get ahead of it? How has the Winnipeg Foundation been trying to, connect with donors about the strike?
Yeah, so we've been not only letting our donors know that they can give via phone, we're also doing e-blasts to donors, and we're supporting the charitable sector as much as we can as well to make sure that they're having those messages too.
Part of this is also that you guys wouldn't you be doing like direct mail marketing at this time of year to kind of get the word out?
Yeah, so the Winnipeg Foundation does not, but the charitable sector certainly does. And it's not only a direct mail that people respond to, it's also a case for support for the organization. A lot of donors receive that, and it's their annual reminder to remember the charitable sector and the charities that they love. And they may go online and make a gift, but that prompt is very, very important. And so we're very concerned. We're hearing that charities weren't able to get their mailings out because that traditionally happens mid-November, or they were, as Vince said, donors haven't been able to respond to those mailings.
What would your message be to donors who might have empty mailboxes right now?
Yeah, don't forget the charitable sector. Manitoba is consistently the most generous province. And, when you were talking about the neighborly love that your listeners are calling in about, that's all acts of generosity. And Manitoba is the most generous province per capita in the country. And so remembering your charitable sector, call them to make a gift over the phone. But when you make that call, also remember that they're probably receiving an increase in phone calls. So please be patient when you're making those calls. You can visit organizations like Canada Helps to make a gift online to multiple charities if that's easier, or visit your charity's website and find out how other ways of giving.
I was going to ask you something that you just alluded to here, whether or not you have a sense of whether or not there's already been a change in the, the number of people who are giving online or over the phone in the face of this.
Yes, I'm very concerned. Just hearing, I was at the National Philanthropy Day Awards on November 15th, and hearing from the charities directly about their concerns about the impact that this is going to be, seeing an already creative sector being even more creative to try to come up with ways of reaching their donors. And so my advice to them has been e-blast if you can. Also maybe do voicemail broadcasts. Make sure your how to give is very prominently displayed on your website, and maybe get some volunteers in to call those annual donors and thank them and remind them of the importance of their annual gift annually. If you're a donor, you might consider making a monthly gift, or also checking your email to make sure the charities have emailed you, and also check your junk mail because they might be going there. But please don't forget the charitable sector this holiday season. It's very important for our community.
Just lastly, when it comes to giving, obviously, a lot of people give at the end of the calendar year as well because they're counting on a tax receipt. So
yes,
what impact might the strike have on that?
Well, we'll have to wait and see, right? There may be changes that CRA sometimes will do, but in all as we know it now, December 31st is the last day to receive that charitable tax receipt. So if you're trying to receive charitable tax receipt this year, I would try to make a gift in a different way other than just the mail.
Thank you very much for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So we'll see what the season brings. Mary Beth Taylor, Vice President of Community Generosity for the Winnipeg Foundation, talking about the potential impacts of the Canada Post strike on the charitable sector.
This winter, help us make the season kind by supporting Harvest Manitoba. I'm Vince Barletta, CEO of Harvest Manitoba. All it takes is one can of food, $1, or even 1 hour of your time. Join CBC as we donate a day of programming in support of Harvest Manitoba December 6th. Find ways to give to Harvest Manitoba at cbc.ca/kindmb.
A Singapore publisher asked customers to ignore their subway ride and escape into a book. A French supermarket sold copies of Moby Dick at its fish counter. And a cagey Brazilian bookseller got felons to write reviews. The Art of Marketing a Book on Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly, Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
Bundle up, Manitoba. It's cold out there, top to bottom. Roblin's the cold spot at minus 28. In Winnipeg, minus 7. So not quite that cold, of course, but minus 7, and light snow and drifting snow is being reported. Our high today is going to be around minus 6. Well, Scott Regehr is here with Morning Sports, but first I have a small story to share. Hi, Scott.
Hey, good morning.
We've been talking about best neighbors ever. I don't know if you ever had good neighbors yourself. But
Yeah.
So the one that comes to mind for me, I had this when we first bought our house in Winnipeg. We had a garden in the back. I bought way too many tomato plants. I had no idea what I was doing. Then we went on
Tomato plants. Okay.
Yeah. Then we went on vacation, and then we came back, and then shuffled across the street. I'm using the word shuffle because it's true, and someone else used it this morning, and it was my neighbor too. Came Joe. And he had these, these big, strong, leathery hands. And Joe was like the greatest neighbor, quite a bit older. And he said, "How are you doing? How'd your garden do while you were away?" And I said, "It looks amazing, Joe. Look at my plants. Everything looks great." And he goes, "Yeah, and you didn't get a lot of weeds." I said, "We really didn't. Look at it. It looks amazing." And then he winked at me. And I realized he weeded my entire garden while we were away.
Oh, man.
And
that's a proper neighbor. It's like the olden days, You don't get neighbors like that every day anymore.
I know. I had to shout out Joe this morning. That was crazy.
Exactly the same situation. Going away in the summer, and my neighbor is Tommy, who, bless him, did exactly the same thing. And our tomatoes look incredible. Best tomatoes in the block. I think he likes his wife. My wife, she's very friendly. And anyway, so Tommy, shout out to him. And we have a Portuguese neighbor right across the street. She's never shared her name. She doesn't really speak English, but she jarred the tomatoes for us. She just asked us for some tomatoes, jarred them, and we make these beautiful tomato sauces.
Oh, so you've got like a whole street rolling with that.
I do. I'm very fortunate on my street. So maybe you got to talk to Joe and say, "Do you do any, canning?"
He's not there anymore.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I know. It's all right. It's a good memory. Let's talk about hockey. It was a battle of the top two teams in the NHL last night, and the Jets prevailed.
Yep, they did over Minnesota 4-1. The star, as he's been so often in this excellent campaign for the Jets, Connor Hellebuck, faced a season-high 44 shots, stopped all but one of them. A performance, Marcy, that not only impressed his teammates, but the opposition as well. Wild general manager Bill Guerin was seen outside the Jets locker room last night after the game, congratulating Connor. And it has to be noted that Guerin is the GM of Team USA that's going to compete at the upcoming Four Nations tournament. So I'm sure some words revolving around that were shared. Those well wishes were not unwarranted, though. After the first period, the two teams were tied last night, but Minnesota had triple the amount of shots. Head coach Scott Arniel says that might have been a little inaccurate.
I think the shot guy fell asleep on the button. No, but Minnesota does. They throw a lot of pucks in that front, and there was. We went and looked at our scoring chances. Certainly didn't reflect what all the shots that were coming. But they are a team that likes to throw pucks there with bodies around there. I thought we did a really good job of finding a lot of the rebounds and kind of clearing them out of there.
Jets continue to hold top spot in the league standings, off today before they take on the Kings in L.A. tomorrow.
Let's go to curling for the first time in a long time. A major event's going on in Newfoundland.
Yeah, some of the top players in the world in St. John's, where the National starts today. A Grand Slam event and first major bonspiel on the rock since 2017, Marcy. That year, hometown favorites Team Gushu sent a sellout crowd into a frenzy, winning the province's first Brier in more than 4 decades. Mark Nichols was part of that rink, just as he is now.
I think we'd be kidding ourselves if we said that it's going to be the same type of event. The excitement's there, definitely. Those nervous, anxious moments right now are there. I'm hoping it'll go away as we kind of get into the event and get into the games, because we do want to put on a good show and we want to make lots of great shots for the people who are coming down, buying tickets, our friends, family, and who are looking forward to seeing us play.
That's Team Gushu vice skip Mark Nichols. Although they will be the crowd favorites at the National this week, Marcy, they aren't necessarily favorites to win it all. That distinction would belong to Scotland's Bruce Mowat. His rink has won both of the Grand Slam events held this season, and in both instances, he beat Gushu in the final.
And let's finish with football. It was brother versus brother in the NFL.
Yeah, Baltimore Ravens coach John Harbaugh against his younger brother Jim's LA Chargers. And just as we saw in the previous two instances, it was John who prevailed. The last time they faced off against each other was in the Super Bowl back in 2013, where John's Ravens won. And then he went to go give Jim a hug, and Jim just sort of put the forearm out and said, "No hug today." Apparently, it's like the elephant in the room with the general Harbaugh clan whenever they get together. Last night, they embraced. So just in time for American Thanksgiving. Won't be uncomfortable around the turkey.
Thanks.
You bet.
Scott Ricker with Morning Sports. A couple traffic notes here. Fermor and St. Mary's Road, a collision's knocked down a light standard, so expect delays. Treat as an all four-way stop before proceeding through, so signals are flashing red there. Also, Alfred Avenue, that fire has closed to 600 block to all traffic. That's part of McGregor, and Mackenzie's also closed between Burroughs and Aberdeen. Your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it is still -7. Temperature's not going to budge a whole lot today, a high of -6, and that is seasonal for this time of year. The latest police shooting in Winnipeg is more proof officers need body cameras. That view from a former BC police chief. A man was shot dead by police outside Unicity Mall on Sunday. Police say the suspect had stabbed an officer in the throat. Video on social media shows the shooting, but former West Vancouver Police Chief Cash Heed says that video might not tell the full story.
The use of technology such as body-worn cameras by our police officers is absolutely paramount so we can understand what has happened and why the officer took the action he or she would take or has taken.
Heed says the officers will have to justify their use of lethal force. He says they'll have to show their lives were in imminent danger based on what the suspect was doing at the time, not what the suspect did previously. Some Winnipeg charities are starting to feel the squeeze as the Canada Post strike continues into its second week. Donations are often sent by mail. Harvest Manitoba collects and distributes food to more than 1 million Manitobans. CEO Vince Barletta says a postal disruption can have a huge impact on the annual revenues of charities like his.
Organizations like ours raise half or more of all their revenue for the year during the holidays, so it makes a huge impact when there's anything that potentially cuts in to our holiday fundraising. Direct mail is a huge part of how we raise money during the holidays.
Barletta says direct payments to Harvest make up about 30% of its annual revenue. He says there has been a shift to donating online, but it hasn't completely replaced checks some donors still send by mail. Now, the Canada Post strike is having other unusual impacts. Emily Wallstrom is struggling to get her father's ashes. Dennis Wallstrom died a month ago in Surrey, BC. He grew up in Manitoba and wanted to be buried here. Emily Wallstrom says she was told the parcel containing her father's cremated remains would arrive at her Montreal home November 20th. That changed when Canada Post workers went on strike. She says her father's remains now are in limbo at a Canada Post facility in Richmond, BC.
Very undignified for someone that we love to be in a warehouse somewhere collecting dust, and we have no idea if Canada Post is going to take on that responsibility to ship human remains. There needs to be some accountability.
In a statement, Canada Post says it sympathizes with those affected. It says once the strike ends, secured mail and parcels will be delivered on a first-in, first-out basis. Wallstrom says the family may have to postpone her father's burial until the ground thaws in the spring. The mayor of Swan River appreciates the province's help dealing with the drug problem, but says solutions so far have been piecemeal. Rural regional health authorities are getting $30,000 each to clean up and dispose of needles. The move was spurred by complaints of needle litter in Swan River. Mayor Lance Jacobson wants to know how the province will help rehabilitate people addicted to drugs.
What is your plan? We can't just go around saying, okay, we're going to, spend a bunch of money and collecting needles and hiring people or staff or whatever to take on this role. We need to have a plan. And we're still waiting to see what the province is going to deal with.
Right now, needles are only being handed out in Swan River through Public Health. A nonprofit group stopped distributing them, and the emergency room at the local hospital stopped handing out needles temporarily because of that litter problem. Well, a seismic shock may be on the horizon for Canada's economy. Donald Trump says he will impose 25% tariffs on all goods from Canada and Mexico on his first day in office. It's something Trump also said on the campaign trail. Now officials in Ottawa are preparing a Canadian response. You can hear more on that story as well as other national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. Facing a rival.
Score! I follow off a brilliant play by Kupari, and we are tied at 1.
Alex Iafallo in the first period on TSN as the Winnipeg Jets take down the Minnesota Wild 4-1. His 2 goals last night make his total NHL goals add up to 100. And head coach Scott Arniel says that is a huge accomplishment.
That's one thing about Al. He's such a, all-purpose player. We use him on the penalty kill. He's out there with the power play. Then certainly when you need him to shut down the opposition, he does a great job. And, he's a real good pro that gives. We know what we're getting every night from him.
Jets netminder Connor Hellebuck making 43 saves. It is his 15th win in 17 starts. The Jets stay on the road. Next up is a late night in L.A., the Jets-Kings game starting at 9 o'clock tomorrow night. You can find more Manitoba news at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Going to be a late one for Jets fans, for sure. Let's go to Abby, who's here with our regional forecast. Hi, Abby.
Hi, Marcy. We're looking at mostly cloudy conditions for Winnipeg and the Red River Valley. Slight chance of flurries this morning. Some areas reporting fog, so you need to be careful on the road, though that should be clearing this morning. It will be breezy at some point. Then you'll see some calm breeze in the afternoon period with highs around -6. If we're looking across the province, Thompson should see some light flurries as well. Churchill is going to stay quiet with a slim chance of snow in the forecast. And other regions, we're looking at that frigid start with temperatures close to -23 this afternoon. Right now, Winnipeg, we are at -7, heading to a high of -6.
All right, thanks very much, Abby.
Thank you.
So we've got a couple problems in traffic. The big one actually just started yesterday, and it's going to last till March. This is basically just to let you know, Portage Avenue West, because of the Omens Creek reconstruction, this is 2 lanes, and it is west from, is it I always get the name of the street.
Strathcona.
Strathcona, thank you. There's Corey Funk.
Yes. Hi. Strathcona
let's
to
tie up.
Empress or so. Yeah, roughly around there. Thanks for covering. I just getting the mic going for the
no
guest.
worries.
A couple other things to keep an eye out for, and that is particularly on Fermor and St. Mary's Road. There was a collision there earlier. It's actually knocked down the traffic signals, the pole there. So those signals now are flashing red in all directions. Treat that as a 4-way stop. I'm guessing that probably means some pretty big backups for folks. As well, there's a fire on Alfred Avenue on the 600 blocks, and that means it's closed, particularly from Parr to McGregor. Also, Mackenzie is closed between Burroughs and Aberdeen. Hearing about slippery highways north of Dauphin on Highway 20 from Raven. Thomas also called. He says it's actually fog on Highway 16 around Shoal Lake or so. So careful, careful around there as well. So if you see anything else going on, though, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
Well, my next guest lives in Old Tuxedo. Claudia Corona has been in a heated competition there, though, with her neighbor of 20 years. It is not over who can have the greenest lawn or the best holiday display. Claudia and Dan Eisen compete to see who can be the better neighbor. How awesome is that? A few months ago at Dan's wedding, Claudia delivered a speech about what it's like to be neighbors with him. And in her carefully worded speech, she dubbed him the BNE. And she's here in studio to talk more about this and what that means. Hi.
Hi, good morning.
BNE.
BNE.
What
not
does that
the
mean?
bee's knees and not the B and E.
What does it mean?
But the best neighbor ever.
The BNE, Dan.
I won the lottery. I absolutely have the best neighbor ever.
So how did this competition begin? What is this, 20 years?
It's 20 years, and I think that the concept of Dan's my chosen family, and it happened in very small moments over time. And so it's not grand gestures, it's small gestures and chosen family, because when you look at your neighbor like that and care about, I think it's about caring about them. And we've been through it over 20 years, and it just developed into this, moment where he asked me to speak. I was the only non-family member at that wedding, a very small, intimate wedding. And for a year, I was absolutely I was skipping. I had to skip in my step because he chose me. And it really validated that all the things we've been through as neighbors has created this. I mean, we may not be neighbors because his house is for sale. I'm still hoping no one will buy it. We may have to follow him so we can be best neighbors ever, forever. Yeah, it's just, I think that when life gets so difficult, I think it's important that we take care of each other, especially when the ones we live so close to.
I love that. I love how you put all of that. Did you share some of that in the speech? What did you share in your speech?
I sure did. When I said I won the lottery, it's gifts, so thoughtful gifts, like a vintage red bicycle built for two for our 10th wedding anniversary, which we've been riding for 10 years, and it was with a big bow in the yard. It's just been all the milestones. We are so blessed with gifts, and I don't know if you remember when there was an app where you
take your time. Yeah.
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
It was about works of arts in art galleries.
Okay.
And one looked like my daughter. And then, he works in the estate field, and he found one and brought it home. And now we have it in our house.
Wow.
I mean, just so thoughtful, and also funny things like really funny, weird bumper stickers. We may have started that one.
What are some of these? Are they radio clean? What are some of these bumper
Maybe
stickers?
not. So I won't even go there. And this Halloween, a sort of scary doll in the tree facing our yard, which who knows what we're going to turn it into next for the Christmas holidays. We may change it into an angel, but.
So did this start with you guys meeting in the yard? Do you even remember, or sitting out there? Is it the shared moments, or you know what I mean? They build up over the years.
His sister lived in the house before, and he bought it from her, and so she was also best neighbor ever.
Yeah.
But we've had more time with him, or I've had more time with him. So,
what memories stick out for you? Obviously, you've mentioned a few of them, but I don't want to cut you off if you have other stories you really want to share.
There's a few things like snow blow. I call him snow blower, lawn mower, clover grower, furnace ranger, tire changer, garage rearranger. So I think some of those things, it's sort of like classic, or what I think neighbors events should be. So,
what did it mean to you to be able to dub Dan best neighbor ever, and even today to be able to tell Manitoba about Dan?
Oh, I'm a little bit beside myself because what came out. I worked really hard on that speech. I'm not a public speaker, as you can tell, and I didn't want to let him down because he chose me, and he is the best neighbor ever. He's the best friend ever. He's my chosen family. And so this is an absolute thrill that this came out of a love sort of speech.
There's traditions you guys actually have as well, right? So what are some of the traditions you have?
Well, he's also, one of those lines was the Christmas gift stasher, because he would stash Santa Claus gifts and then come over and help us, and him and his now wife, Desiree. They built the Barbie dream house. And I mean, they took the decals out, they opened it up, they set it up like Barbie had been living there for 10 years. And so right down to hiding gifts and celebrating Christmas Eves for years with us and our family and all the milestones.
Love that. Yeah. What are the qualities that make someone a good neighbor? Where people are writing in about their neighbors.
Yeah, I love that. Oh my! I've been listening all morning. Yeah. Chosen family. Like how do you want to treat people that you love the most, and caring for them, and it could be the littlest thing that makes the biggest difference for someone.
We're going to share more stories. And if people were watching YouTube, they would have seen your letter and some of the special things you share with Dan. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
And talking about your BNE.
Thank you. I love you, BNE. He couldn't be here because he's having dentist work. So
I love that you know
I'm
that.
even being a BNE right now.
That is Claudia Corona live with us from she lives in Old Tuxedo, and then I have Charleswood. So what's your neighborhood? Or
Yeah, like where Wellington Crescent Meets Academy. It's it used to be like people that lived in Westgate 120 years ago. This is their cottage.
Yeah, I always like to name the neighborhoods correctly,
Yeah.
so I had 2 different neighborhood
Yeah.
names. I wanted to make sure. So,
Old Tuxedo.
talking to us about the definition of best neighbor ever. And as you heard, Claudia and I have been enjoying these stories this morning. So let's read a few more here, shall we, just for a minute? So you've been writing in about your B&Es, and you've been calling us as well at 788-3205. So Allison Norberg wrote into us and said, we had wonderful neighbors growing up. Tina and Gordon Henwood. He was a retired teacher, and she made great cookies. They loved having 6 kids next door. We visited them. They hired my brothers to shovel snow. And at the end of the school year, we trooped over with our report cards and we had a tea party. After our report cards were reviewed, packets of money were passed around with each name beautifully written by Mrs. Henwood. They wanted us to have a treat of our choosing to celebrate our hard work, such kind and supportive neighbors. So if you got the B&E, call us 788-3205 or write to us on Facebook. 7:45 a.m. is the time right now on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. on the app and YouTube. And it is in Winnipeg, some drifting snow and some light snow falling. And we're only going to be around -6 for the day. Do you ever have that situation where your mouse won't register? I've got that right now. So here we go. It worked. I'm updating our temperatures here. Last temperature I had was -7, and right now we are still sitting at -7. We've been there all morning, actually. And I just want to mention the hot spot and cold spot. The hot spot, quote unquote, is Victoria Beach, -3, and the cold spot this hour is Roblin still. It's at -28. And Brandon, I should mention as well, is going to be very cold today. The high -16, but with wind chill, it'll feel like -32. So certainly bundle up this morning in Manitoba. Well, next on the program, let's turn to serious matters. November is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, but one Manitoba woman does not need that reminder because Sarah is a survivor of a previous relationship that she says was full of emotional, financial, and physical abuse. Today, she's sharing her story in a feature interview to help raise awareness of domestic and intimate partner violence. We are not sharing her last name to protect those involved. In a warning, our conversation deals, as mentioned, with intimate partner violence.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for sharing. Tell me a little bit about what you feel like when you share, because I think that's important to ask.
It took me a few years, even after leaving the relationship, to start speaking out loud of things that had happened. While I shared certain details with close friends and family, I left a lot of it out. And I think it's because a part of me knew how much harm I endured during that relationship and how toxic it was, but I was ashamed. And I think too, because I was in that relationship for 8 years and it took me a long time to leave. But when I finally did leave and, this is the first year, I think I've been out of that relationship now for 3 years and I'm starting to talk about it more publicly and sharing my experiences and realizing that there are a lot of other women that have either encountered similarities, have same stories or, in those current relationships. And I'm just hoping that by sharing my own experiences, it helps people understand, intimate partner violence a little bit more and how to support folks going through it.
You said 8 years you were in the relationship. When would you first say that you realized that it was abusive and could say that?
Yeah, we met, I was 17, so very young. And then in the first 2 years, things seemed to go swimmingly well. And there was probably a few warning signs of aggression and anger, but I just thought, this is just who he is.
What do you mean by warning signs?
There would be times where he would start throwing a few household items, whether it was a remote or dishes or punching a wall, which seemed small to me at the time. But from over there, it progressed to the point where he would smash and break end tables, coffee tables, bookshelves. He flipped the bed one time when I was sleeping on it out of anger. And just breaking basically everything that was in our home at the time.
So it escalated beyond there, and then you first realized this was something else. What happened?
I didn't feel the need to call the police, which sounds really silly when I say it out loud now.
Nothing is silly.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
But there were most definitely, our neighbors who would call in police and they would come and do check-ins. And that for 1 year, there was probably at least 6+ police calls that were made from either myself or people who would hear the yelling and crying. And And even in that state, I just thought, oh no, I have to be a better partner. I have to do better on my side so that he's not going to react in these ways, which most definitely was not the right mindset, but that's how I felt in those times.
Only in so much you're willing to share and comfortable sharing and see value in sharing. I mentioned emotional, financial, and physical abuse.
Yeah, I guess to touch on it, he most definitely did steal money from me to supply his toxic habits, unfortunately. He would take rent money. He wasn't able to keep a job. So, I was supporting him already to a certain degree. There was times too where he would take money from my parents as well.
And emotionally, what kinds of things did he make you believe about yourself?
He would call me names. He also made me feel really bad about the fact if I did call the police on him. He said if I did that it meant I didn't love him and I didn't care about him. And there was, it got to the point where he would start taking my keys and my shoes and my phone so I wouldn't leave or call the police for help.
Physically, I think often when people don't know, and it's so personal and different for every person, the trigger point sometimes is when something turns physical. It not always is. Was it for you?
The way I speak of it, I say, no, he didn't hit me or punch me or slap me, but there was other physical altercations. He would restrain me to the point where I was kind of being choked out, or he would kind of flip me down onto the ground, just stop me from leaving. And then other cases where he would be throwing things that would be most likely in my direction, and those items would hit me.
Yeah. You said, at first it took some time to recognize it as abuse. Why do you think that is? Just in your bigger understanding also about the trying to help other people?
I think for myself, because I was so invested in this relationship and we had already had a good 2 years together, and I thought this was the partner that I was supposed to be my life partner and end up with. And like I said, I thought that maybe I wasn't being a good enough girlfriend to him, and it was my fault that he was having these behaviors. So I was trying to better myself or serve him to see if it would stop. But then again, being stuck in that mindset, I think, is what kept me in that relationship for so long. I also did notice when I did try to break off the relationship that it kind of did put me in a dangerous situation where he would become aggressive. There was a few stalking cases too when I would try to separate, where he'd be waiting for me outside of my workplace and just always wanted to know where I was.
So there was a cost to recognizing.
Yeah. And I think too, the last thing that was the cutoff with him is when he broke into my apartment and broke my door down. And I think all the other times when he came over, I always let him in because I had that fear of him breaking the door down. And finally, I'm like, you know what? I'm putting my foot down. I don't want him in my space. And then by him breaking the door down, that led to me calling the police.
So what was your experience with calling the police, and what challenges did you face as well in the justice system?
Well, again, through at least 2 years of the toxic relationship, I did reach out to police. The police that I did deal with in those situations, I didn't feel supported, or was more like, you guys can't be making noise after a certain time. And I felt kind of chaotic because when the police would show up, he would be really calm and I'd be more frantic and kind of worked up from crying or just being in those environments. So I kind of felt like it looked like I was maybe the one that was causing more harm. And then there was one incident too where I had to leave the apartment. I didn't have my phone, so I had flagged down a police officer car and kind of explained to them, and they said they were busy dealing with something else and they could drop me off somewhere if I waited. But to me, I'm like, it's 2 a.m. in the morning. I don't have shoes. I don't have my keys. I don't have my phone. And they kind of made it seem like it was my fault. So I just went back home to my abuser and spent the night there with him.
How do we do better? Obviously, you're an advocate for this now. I'm wondering what you think is needed the most right now to help people who are in the situation as you were.
I think education, for our police officers, but also just for all the other support systems in place, and just to be patient and also feel comfortable. Because like I said, for me, in my case, I knew if I did try to leave, it was dangerous in some situations. And I've known friends and who've also been in dangerous situations, and sometimes even going through getting a restraining order, it still didn't protect them. So kind of looking at the bigger picture and seeing how we can either catch it earlier, educating ourselves to know when to break away from the relationship, and knowing what other resources aside from police that we can reach out to.
What might those be? I was going to ask what your message would be to those listening who might be experiencing intimate partner violence.
Yeah, I would highlight the Women's Health Clinic. They do have a great counseling program there, and then we're usually connected with a lot of other community-based programs that we would be able to, direct folks, because again, everyone's experience is a little bit different. So I feel like there's something a little more catered to each of them if they did reach out, and just knowing too that it is okay to reach out. There are also women's shelters that are available. I had only used their helpline to talk with them. I didn't actually physically leave to go there, but I think they're also another really great resource.
If people, you mentioned other supports as well. Some people might be supporting and not realize that they're either saying or doing the wrong thing, or they're missing something. What are some of the misunderstandings that people have about those who experience domestic abuse?
I think it's so easy to tell someone just to leave. And I think in my mind too, I'm like, oh yeah, I should just walk away from this. But there was a lot more emotional attachment because this is someone who I did love and I cared about. So I had that aspect of like a breakup is already bad, but then I'd also had all these other layers of danger. And then also I did worry for his mental well-being as well, until I realized like he's not my responsibility. He's an adult. He has to take accountability. So I think too, a lot of my friends were frustrated, but really I just asked for patience from them and trying to understand the statistics of it and how it does take usually more than the first time of trying to leave an abusive relationship to actually leave.
How are you doing now?
I think I'm doing really great. I'm 3 years out of the relationship. I've learned a lot about myself. I'm speaking more publicly about it and seeing the difference that I'm able to make to support other people.
What do you love about yourself that maybe he would have told you that, if you felt, I don't know, less than or worthless or whatever you're describing, the messages he might have put in your head. What do you love about yourself now?
I love of how I think I'm a powerhouse and just multi-talented in the work that I do, and that I'm growing. And I think I'm, in that relationship, I didn't feel like I could grow anymore. It's like he kept me in a cage and very close to him so I wouldn't grow too much to realize that I'm better than this. So yeah, I'm most definitely better than that relationship as a whole, and I'm just a really amazing person.
Well put. Thank you so much for coming in, Sarah. It does a great deal of good to so many people. I can't even understate that, of course, as you know. So appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Obviously, there I should have said overstate that, but Sarah's a survivor of intimate partner violence. I had a long interview with her that you heard unedited. That was our conversation yesterday. If you or someone that you know is experiencing domestic violence, you can reach out to Clinic with a K Community Health at 786-8686. 786-8686 or toll free 1-888-322-3019. November is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Let's go to Heather Wells for our news headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, an expert on the use of force says what was on the minds of Winnipeg police officers before they shot a man Sunday evening will be a key part of the investigation into what happened. Police say the man had stabbed an officer in the throat before officers fired shots at the man. The man later died in hospital. Some Winnipeg charities are starting to feel the squeeze as the Canada Post strike continues into its second week. Donations often are sent by mail. Harvest Manitoba CEO Vince Barletta says a postal disruption can have a huge impact on the annual revenues of charities like his. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 8:30.
All right, thank you, Heather. It's 3 minutes to 8 o'clock. It is -7 in Winnipeg. We're going to be around -6 today. And with wind chill, it's going to feel more like -21. So bundle up. On the morning commute, there's quite a number of things going on. And one of them is going to last until March. So that is right around Omans Creek. It's 2 lanes, Portage Avenue going west that you're going to lose because they're doing reconstruction there. There's also a couple of other problems. I'm actually going to ask Corey to come in the studio, because the list is disappeared. So, Corey, there's 2 other problems. There's light standards down in one spot, I think.
Yeah, on St. Mary's and Fermor, light standard is down. It is flashing red in all directions. You just want to treat that as a 4-way stop, but as you can imagine, big backups. Also, there's a fire on Alfred Avenue, the 600 block, so that's closed on Alfred from Parr to McGregor. So if that's part of your commute, you want to find another way around that.
While you're here, you've been busy this morning because you also booked Chuck Davidson to talk to us. So he is, of course,
Yes.
President and CEO of Manitoba Chambers of Commerce. Just happens to be in Ottawa. He's meeting with the Canadian Chamber there. This is about tariffs.
Yeah, and he's and they're all chatting, I'm sure, since the news broke, and they're really hoping that the federal and provincial governments will stop those tariffs. So we're going to talk with him after 8 about what he's hoping to see.
We also, after 8, are going to talk about the crime rate rising and police being called on to have more safety. Pardon me. I'm reading something that is not written correctly, so I'm just going to go straight off script here. We have Sheila North that is in studio, former Grand Chief, to talk about the role of technology in policing. She's calling for Winnipeg police officers to wear cameras. Stay with us.
On Q with Tom Power. Paris Hilton is a pop culture icon and has been ever since she stepped out with Nicole Richie as one of the stars of The Simple Life. She's also a musician, and now she's back with a brand new record. So she'll be here to talk to you about her life, her fame, and her new music.
That's hot.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
It is beautiful in the prairies today. It's also very, very cold. I'm in Saskatoon, where I'm talking to the author Guy Vanderheg. I'm visiting a pool producing champion divers, and we're looking at how this city is tackling homelessness, all on a special edition of The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. The Canadian government has already begun its response to Donald Trump's tariff threat. Some premiers are also speaking out. Trump said he will slap a 25% tariff on all products entering the country from Canada and Mexico, unless those countries slow the flow of drugs and illegal migrants across their borders. Let's go to Janice McGregor in our Parliamentary Bureau. And Janice, how are Canadian leaders responding so far?
Marcia, as luck would have it, the Federal Cabinet Committee that was revived to focus on Canada's relationship with the U.S. in the aftermath of Trump's election victory was actually meeting at the time this threatening social media post went up. By the end of the evening, the two lead ministers, Chrystia Freeland and Dominic LeBon, had put out a statement saying that trade is balanced, that the U.S. needs Canada's energy, that enforcement agencies are prioritizing a fentanyl crackdown, and that the number of U.S. Border Patrol encounters with migrants crossing the northern border illegally are a small fraction of the number along Mexico's border. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau then had what sources told CBC News was a good phone call with Trump making some of these same points, but that wasn't the only call he had to make last night. Earlier in the day, Canada's premiers had already begun stirring the pot, circulating a letter calling for an urgent meeting so they could discuss their participation in some kind of as yet undefined Team Canada approach to engaging with the incoming administration. Trump's social media post triggered several premiers to double down on their concerns, with posts of their own taking shots at the federal government's handling of the file so far. Trudeau's late evening calls to the premiers of Ontario and Quebec last night, a sign that he's fighting a political battle now on two fronts.
If there's no unified response, how could that affect Canada's negotiating position?
Well, hard to see how it makes it stronger. To have a key swing vote in the House of Commons, like NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, for example, posting that Trudeau can't keep his head in the sand and needs to stand up and fight like hell. Perrin Beatty, who was the head of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce during the first Trump administration, says this kind of response is not smart.
I can't think of a worse response than to start a spinning contest across the 49th parallel.
Former Conservative Cabinet Minister James Moore last night suggested the point of this threat of Trump's might be to soften Canada up. And if Trump was watching the reaction of Canadian stakeholders last night, he might have concluded it's working.
Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
Janice McGregor reporting from Ottawa. Trump also vowed to levy an additional 10% tariff on all Chinese products sent to the U.S. The president-elect says it is because of China's failure to curb the flow of illegal drugs into the United States. The CBC's Crystal Gomansing is following this angle of the story for us. And Crystal, what are we hearing from Beijing today?
Well, officials in Beijing are saying they're focused on maintaining an open dialogue with the United States. This as China gets ready to face aggressive tariffs on everything it exports to the U.S. China's ambassador to Australia says this could impact the country's bilateral relations.
First and most is to continue the good relation and momentum between our two countries. Of course, the U.S. policy on trade with China, with other countries as well, will have impact. And that is really an important element that we have to consider.
Now, in Beijing, a spokesperson for the foreign ministry was asked if talks are taking place with President-elect Donald Trump's transition team. Mao Ning said, as a principle, we are open to maintaining dialogue and communication. In a statement, a spokesperson for the Chinese embassy in the United States said that no one will win a trade war or a tariff war. Now, Trump has said in a post on his Truth Social page that he would impose the additional tariff of 10% on Chinese imports until it stops the flow of illegal drugs into the U.S. Beijing says it has already taken steps to combat drug trafficking thanks to an agreement between President Xi Jinping and U.S. President Joe Biden, which was signed just over a year ago.
Thank you, Crystal.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Crystal Gomansing in London. Israel and Hezbollah are reportedly on the cusp of a ceasefire agreement. One Lebanese official has told Reuters there are no serious obstacles left to start implementing the plan. And Israel's cabinet also appears poised to approve the deal. Even so, air raid sirens rang out over northern Israel this morning. The CBC's Tom Perry is near the Israel-Lebanon border.
I was here. I was asleep. My wife was there.
Abraham Mioni's bedroom, now a shattered mess of smashed concrete and broken glass. He and his wife were sleeping last night in their apartment in Nahariya in northern Israel when they heard the wail of an air raid siren.
She went to the shelter. I was after her. And a few seconds later, we heard the explosion.
A rocket launched by Hezbollah slammed into their building, blowing out windows and walls. This isn't the first time a rocket has landed in this area, but this attack comes as Israel and Hezbollah look set to sign a ceasefire.
I don't think that this ceasefire will remain.
Mioni worries any peace with Hezbollah would be temporary, that the group will rebuild, rearm, and attack Israel again. His neighbor Amat Gamliel has that same fear.
You know, we're dealing with terrorists. Their only goal is to kill us and to annihilate us. They don't want anything else.
Despite that, Israel's cabinet is set to meet today to approve the text of this deal to settle, at least for now, one bitter conflict on its northern flank, while in the south, its war against Hamas in Gaza drags on. Tom Perry, CBC News, Nahariya, Israel.
Beef prices are hitting record highs. Brenna Grant is with CanFax, a beef statistics firm. She says cattle prices are between 45 and 65% higher than the 5-year average.
Globally, we've got a growing population, a growing middle class, and they want more protein. And it's not just beef, it's pork and poultry as well.
Drought in parts of the country means beef prices, feed prices are rising for ranchers, and many of them have scaled back their operations. That means Canada's beef supply is dwindling, even with growing global demand. Paul Bernardo is scheduled to appear before the Parole Board of Canada today. He is serving a life sentence for the kidnapping, sexual assault, and murder of 2 Ontario teens in the 1990s. He was also convicted of manslaughter in the death of his sister-in-law. Bernardo has already been denied parole twice. To southern France. Applause for Gisèle Pellicot as she arrives at the Avignon courthouse. Proceedings continue today in the trial against her ex-husband and dozens of other men accused of raping her. Today in court, prosecutors are expected to say what sentences they will seek for those 50 other defendants. They are seeking a maximum 20-year prison sentence for her 71-year-old former husband. He admitted to drugging his then-wife and inviting dozens of strangers to their home to rape her while she was unconscious. Verdicts and sentences are expected at the end of December. Canada's Senate could pass a private member's bill today. It's called Georgina's Law, and it proposes a national strategy to stop intimate partner violence. The CBC's Heather Gillis now with more on Georgina's story.
My last beating was September 25th, 2014.
A beating so severe it almost took Georgina McGrath's life. She survived the horrific violence committed by an ex-partner. Now an advocate, McGrath is trying to prevent violence against other women.
Well, there's no actual strategy nationally.
Newfoundland and Labrador Senator Fabian Manning and McGrath have been trying to get one into law since 2018.
Every 6 days in this country, there is a woman killed for an intimate partner.
Manning says if a victim goes to hospital with a gunshot or knife wound, it's automatically reported to police. But there's no requirement to report physical assaults like the one McGrath survived.
Through Georgina's Law, we'll address some of that over time. It's not going to happen overnight.
Manning sponsored the law, a private member's bill in the Senate. It gives government 2 years to make a strategy, with progress updates every 2 years after that.
There's an incredible amount of intimate partner violence in this country. It's left me bewildered.
Today, McGrath and Manning hope it will pass third reading, then make its way into the House of Commons.
So, this sets the groundwork for something that really needs to be firmly put in place right across our country.
If the bill passes, McGrath says she'll be elated and hopes it can pass a gridlocked House of Commons by this spring. Heather Gillis, CBC News, Toronto.
That is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. It is cold out there. It's -7, but with wind chill feels like -21. That's what it's going to feel like for most of the day in Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa, as mentioned. This is CBC. Thanks for tuning into Information Radio, 89.3 FM, 990 AM on that app and on YouTube. This hour on the program, we are going to talk to former Grand Chief Sheila North about the role of technology in policing as we watch RCMP officers start to suit up with body-worn cameras. She is saying Winnipeg police should do the same, and we're going to hear more about that in the aftermath of a recent shooting this week in the city. Also, this hour on the show, this half hour rather, we will be joined by Chuck Davidson, the president and CEO of the Manitoba Chambers of Commerce. He's in Ottawa. He's talking to the Canadian Chamber, and all of this is about Donald Trump saying 25% tariffs are going to be coming to Canada. What will that mean, and what does he have to say about Manitoba businesses and sectors that are concerned this morning? We're going to hear about that. So stay tuned. Right now, Heather Wells is in with other news headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, a former BC police chief says the latest police shooting in Winnipeg is more proof officers need body cameras. A man was shot dead by police outside Unicity Mall Sunday. Police say the suspect had stabbed an officer in the throat. The former chief of West Vancouver Police says officers are going to have to justify their use of lethal force. As well, the chair of the Winnipeg Police Board says he is hearing that call for body-worn cameras, but says he wants to hear about the RCMP experience first. This week, RCMP at a number of detachments start using body cameras during interactions with the public. We'll hear more coming up in our next local news at 8:30.
All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's get into the weather now with Abby.
We have a cloudy day ahead. Winnipeg, we are at -7. Expect this milly condition to stay with us. A slight chance of flurries in the forecast. Some areas are experiencing fog at this time. That should clear as we get deeper into the morning. Some breezy conditions will be felt, and then we get to a high of -6 across the province. We're looking at similar conditions. A bit of sunny breaks here and there. Westman will be slightly colder. We're looking at highs around -16 in Brandon, so you might just want to prepare accordingly for that. Up north, we're seeing light snow in Thompson at Churchill with temperatures hovering around -8 and -10. Right now, Winnipeg, -7, heading to a high of -6.
Corey, the commute?
Yeah, a couple things to keep an eye out for. Fermor St. Mary's, there's a big collision there that's knocked down the traffic signal pole, so they are flashing red in all directions right now. So just treat that as a four-way stop. as you can imagine, probably some big delays there. As well, all morning there's been a fire at Alfred Avenue in the 600 block between Parr and McGregor as well. So that Parr and McGregor is closed on Alfred Avenue, as well Mackenzie between Burroughs and Aberdeen also closed. Slippery highway conditions in general north of Dauphin, I heard, as well as Highway 16, as well as eastern Manitoba. Here in the city, the good news, I'll cap it off, heard from Dan on a bike. Bike lanes on rapid transit looking pretty good so far, not too bad. So thanks for that call. And if you see anything else going on out there, give me a call on the CBC commuter line, 204-788-3093.
And so just to recap what Heather was sharing in the news here, there are still very few details about the man who was shot and killed by police over the weekend. Winnipeg police do say a man was shot and killed outside a bus shelter, Portage Avenue near Unicity Mall. This all happened Sunday night. Police say the man stabbed an officer in the throat before he was shot by officers. CBC has obtained a video. It appears to show part of the incident. In the video, 2 officers are seen with guns drawn, telling a man to, quote, put it down and, quote, drop it, moments before firing several times. Now, Winnipeg police held a media conference about the shooting Sunday night. Acting Police Chief Art Stannard addressed the videos 2 separate times. So here's part of what he said.
We are aware of videos online, and we caution the public that they do not show the entire incident.
So this was a long police conference. That's just a short clip. Further along in the conversation, here's more of what Stannard said.
I'm concerned that it only shows part of the interaction. That's what I'm concerned about. There was a front part of it that doesn't seem to be on video yet. We're not sure, so I'm concerned about that. And I don't want the public to react to just that part of it. I want them to wait until the whole investigation is done by IU and sort that out.
Acting Police Chief Art Stannard. Now, you can hear the entire police press conference on our CBC Manitoba YouTube page, so you can go there to see the whole video. Now, the case has renewed calls, as you heard in the news, for more police accountability, which includes some calls for body cameras. Several Canadian police agencies already use them, including the RCMP. Just new last week, in fact, Steinbach RCMP started wearing cameras. Of course, the Winnipeg police right now do not wear cameras. Sheila North is a longtime MMIWG advocate and former Grand Chief of Manitoba Q8 Naui Okimakinak, and she says police should have cameras on, and she's in studio. Hi there.
Hi, Marcy.
Why should they have cams on?
Because I think it'll bring another level of accountability and tell the bigger story of what happened, some of the befores and some of the afters. We know of course, the concerns when we only have limited amounts of public video. So that causes all kinds of anxiety and triggers people and re-victimizes people, and it doesn't tell the fuller story. And I think it would start to do that, but also it would give, I think, pause for officers that may not have those ethical, abilities that they need to measure their response when they're dealing with people that are in crisis. So I think it works for both, for the police's protection as well as the public's protection.
You just heard Acting Police Chief Art Stannard saying that he's concerned that the videos circulating right now only show part of the interaction and not what transpired or may have transpired before the police opened fire, or transpired. I just want to be correct here. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with that. I think that, like I say, the video is just part of the story. We don't know what happened before or what happened after. There's mention of the officer doing CPR. We don't see any evidence of that. So it's left with lots of questions and lots of triggers. Many people have heard stories and are part of this fractured relationship with police, whether it's RCMP, Winnipeg Police, or others throughout Canada. When we see police force like that, it automatically, for some, takes it back to the place where we know that unfair practices were practiced and people lost their lives or people got injured. So it's not conducive to good building relationships when we don't have the bigger picture, I don't think.
I want to just look at this, the cameras specifically, through the lens of some reporting we've done. So, we've been talking for many years about the idea of cameras being worn by police. And Kevin Walby's an associate criminal justice professor at the University of Winnipeg. He studied the use of body-worn cameras on police. When CBC's spoken to him in the past, he says studies in North America looking at the use of the cameras show mixed results. So he says there's very little proof use of force cases are significantly reduced. And in some cases, he actually says told CBC that police felt emboldened by the presence of the cameras. I'm only raising this because I'm wondering how you, what you would say to that, but also how you would manage expectations for those that would see cameras as now we'll know, everything. Surely this will change the stats when there is some body of evidence to show that unfortunately, they don't always result in what the community might be hoping, and police maybe, which is safer streets.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think it's the magic bullet, the silver bullet, or whatever you want to call it. But I think it's another tool. And I understand that the video wouldn't be immediately accessible to the public, but I think it would help with the investigation and further down the road, maybe released to the public to explain how things progressed and what happened. We need to get to another point where we have another level of understanding of what's going on in the streets and what's going on in these kind of interactions. Are we misguided? Do we not, when we're not seeing the full picture? Like I say, it's just another tool, but I think it's an absolutely necessary tool, especially at this time. I think it's long overdue for Winnipeg Police to have them. I don't understand how the Winnipeg Police Board haven't implemented them earlier. They should be held accountable, because it's not just the Winnipeg Police that are making decisions. It's the police board, and the board are accountable to the public, and they need to get on board and also find and hire the next police chief that will adhere to that, and more importantly, knows about the community that is most impacted, and that's the Indigenous people and racialized people. And I would hope that they will find the next police chief that is, understanding of all of the importance of all of that.
How have police shootings in 2024, including this most recent one, how have they impacted the community as a whole through your lens?
It's definitely not helping in building that relationships. And someone pointed out that one of the police cars say building relationships on their cars, and this is not helping. And over a dozen so far this year. I mean, I can't remember the stats going back, but that seems like a lot. And I think that we can do better as a society. And I think we're hearing more about some of the other reasons and some of the other resources that should be at play, including responses to mental health and other social issues like that. But yeah, I believe it is another tool that could help tell that bigger story.
And just last, obviously, we're talking about cameras being part of the picture in your view, at any cost, because the police board, when we interview them, is going to say they cost this much, they don't show to be working in these cases. They may bring stats forward. I shouldn't guess what they'll say, but they will likely talk about the cost of these cameras. What would you say to that?
Definitely a factor, but it shouldn't be an excuse and a reason not to get them. This is where then we pull back even further and bring in the governments, all three levels of governments, to be held accountable as well on their serious support and will to build this relationship. It's critical, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better. And I think that we need to keep looking for ways while we're building relationships to give us tools to tell that bigger story.
Thank you very much for coming in with your perspective today.
Thank you, Ekase.
That is Sheila North speaking with us about the calls, including her call for body cameras to be worn by members of the Winnipeg Police Service. The chair of the Winnipeg Police Board, Councillor Marcus Chambers, says incidents like this renews calls for body cameras. He did say the board plans to monitor the rollout of body cameras with the RCMP before they commit to anything. And we've yet to have an updated timeline, by the way, or date for when the announcement will be made for who our next police chief is.
Are there better ways for us to talk to each other? And could that help us build a better society? Novelist and poet Ian Williams wants to start a conversation about conversations. Hi, I'm Nala Ayed. Join me all next week as Ideas presents the 2024 CBC Massey Lectures, What I Mean to Say, Remaking Conversations in Our Time.
Ideas, weeknights at 8:30 in Newfoundland, and on demand on CBC Listen.
8:22 a.m. -8 is the temperature right now, and we're going to be around -6 for the day with a wind chill of -21. It's the bundle up day, and maybe wrap up the kids with that scarf. For sure, don't forget your mitts out there. So we're getting into the real cold stuff. Well, we've been talking about neighbors this morning and your best neighbor ever, but let's talk about our neighbor to the south. People may not be describing the United States in that way right now after Donald Trump has threatened a 25% tariff on products from Canada. Our next guest is going to talk about some of the concerns around that. And our next guest is Chuck Davidson, President and CEO of the Manitoba Chambers of Commerce. He happens to be in Ottawa right now talking with the Canadian Chamber. Good morning, Chuck.
Good morning, Marcy.
What's the biggest worry for Manitoba?
Well, the biggest worry is the potential impact this is going to have. There's no question. When your biggest trading partner, when we do on an annual basis, 77% or close to of Canadian exports are going to the U.S. For Manitoba, it's about 73%. So you're talking about $15 billion annually in exports to the U.S. So when your biggest trading partner says, we want to increase that tariff, we were concerned when the discussion was about 10%. 25% is even more of a concern for us in terms of what that's going to look like and what kind of impact is that going to have on prices, supply chain, job losses, investor confidence. What kind of impact is that going to have on Manitoba businesses? That's a big concern. And so our call is we need to make sure this is the number one concern of both our provincial and federal government to do what's ever possible to lessen the impact of this.
Obviously, you know, we have a lot of analysis of this on throughout the morning, and some are saying Trump sometimes does things for a response, or maybe he's, using this as a starting point for negotiation. But what's your sense of this, and what's at stake if we don't lean in and take this seriously?
Well, I think that what's at stake is significantly to the Canadian economy. I mean, the Canadian Chamber had done a report on this and looked at the case of a 10% tariff would cost the Canadian economy $30 billion, and that's billion with a B. That was at 10%. Look at a 25% and extrapolate how much larger that would be. So this is going to have a significant impact on the Canadian economy if this goes forward. And so what are the elements that the Canadian government could do? Well, obviously you would expect if someone's going to put a tariff on you, you're probably going to do likewise on them. So, and again, it's a no-win situation for either. And again, and this is something that's concerning in terms of what that relationship is looking like. So we need to make sure that we're focused on what's going to be in the best interest of Manitoba and Canadian companies.
Which sectors will be impacted the most? And I just want to read something for the listeners here, because November 6th, Manitoba's Premier Wab Kinew was talking about continuing to push the benefits of trade with the U.S. And he was highlighting to make the case that U.S. benefits from Manitoba goods and its critical minerals, just as an example, that have a lot to offer the American defense sector. That was from our reporting of what the Premier said then. What sectors are you thinking might be most concerned this morning?
Again, it's going to be critical minerals, it's going to be manufacturing, it's going to be ag products, it's going to be energy. All of these things are interconnected between Canada and the U.S. So all of these industries would be ones that you'd have to look in terms of what that impact looks like, whether it's bus manufacturing, aerospace. All of those are companies that have an office in Canada or the U.S. and are doing cross-border on a daily basis. What's the impact of that going to look like? And that's a big concern. We had concerns with sort of a Buy America mentality that was happening in the last number of years. This would take it to another level that we don't think is beneficial for again, either country in terms of that direction. So, which is why we've been saying this needs to be a top priority for both levels of government.
The Premier also pointed out, and this was at that early November press conference, Gary Dewar being an asset in his view, and that was because he was being announced. So the former Premier and ambassador to the U.S. Has been now appointed trade advisor here in Manitoba to this government. In your view, is that what could the impact of that be?
Well, I think it's absolutely crucial that you have boots on the ground in Washington. This is something that we've been calling for, and a lot of other provinces already have this, is to have an office set up in Washington to make sure that you're having regular conversations in regard to this. Having Gary Dewar is a bit of a blessing for Manitoba, the fact that he was the former ambassador to the U.S. and has a good knowledge base. But this needs to be a consistent thing that we do, not just in times of trouble, but also in times when things are good as well, because it's not necessarily just a relationship that you need to have with the president's office. It's one with state senators, it's with Congress people. It needs to understand that, Manitoba and a number of states are number one trading partners with each other. So this isn't just and so that's where some of the pressure and some of the negotiations need to take place, is with the individual states as well that are also beneficial to that relationship with Canada. We're their number one trading partner for many states in the U.S. They need to understand the impact this would potentially have on them as well.
Can you give us an example of a state when you're talking about that?
Yeah, so one of the key states is states like Minnesota, Ohio, Tennessee, as well as Georgia. These are key states from a trading perspective. The back and forth between Manitoba and those states is significant. On an annual basis, Tennessee is one of the biggest trading partners with Manitoba, specifically in regards to pharmaceutical products that are going into that state as well. So these are relationships that have been long-standing, that have been significant in terms of trade going both ways. These are things that we don't want to necessarily negatively impact by rhetoric or by not having that strong relationship that we know is important to both countries.
You use the word rhetoric. I think there may be some people that are thinking it's just rhetoric. It's just bluster. What if we just ignored this? Obviously, that's a wide sweeping, really extreme point of view. But there are some that are saying, you do have to judge how seriously to take this, and also how much of this is rhetoric.
Well, I think that has to be taken into consideration, but I would not take it and just assume that it's rhetoric. I would take it seriously when your number one trading partner, who also recognizes that you're also their number one trading partner, is providing that sort of commentary. You need to take it seriously. I think it speaks to that level of that relationship that needs to happen as well, and making sure that both partners are doing things from a perspective that is going to benefit both. I think is important, and specifically before we get into negotiations on renegotiating CUSMA as well. So we know the challenges that we had with that with the first Trump administration in terms of the messaging that was being sent. I think we do need to take this seriously and recognize the importance of that relationship, which again is why we would strongly suggest both the federal and provincial governments need to step up their game and make sure that we're having that conversation.
We'll leave it there, Chuck. Thank you very much for your time on CBC.
Always a pleasure, Marcy.
Chuck Davidson is in Ottawa right now. He's meeting with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. He's president and CEO Manitoba Chambers of Commerce. They're all getting together across the country to try to put pressure, as you heard, on the federal and provincial levels of government to keep this, top of mind, and to sort of make sure that we move forward and have an understanding and maybe put pressure to lower down what has been put out there, which is the 25% level taxation tariff, on products coming from Canada. That's what the President-elect Donald Trump has put forward. More analysis coming through the day of this as well. If you're a business out there and you want to weigh in and you will be impacted potentially by this, if this happens, 788-3205. Right now it's time for your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it is cloudy, -7 right now in Winnipeg. Just 2 hours west, it's currently -24 in Brandon. A high in Winnipeg today of -6. The latest police shooting in Winnipeg is more proof officers need body cameras. That view from a former BC police chief. A man was shot dead by police outside Unicity Mall on Sunday. Police say the suspect had stabbed an officer in the throat. Video circulating on social media shows the shooting, but former West Vancouver Police Chief Cash Heed says that video might not tell the full story.
The use of technology such as body-worn cameras by our police officers is absolutely paramount so we can understand what has happened and why the officer took the action he or she would take or has taken.
Now, the chair of the Winnipeg Police Board says he's hearing that call for body-worn cameras, but he first wants to gauge the RCMP experience. This week, RCMP at a number of detachments in Manitoba start using body cameras during interactions with the public. Councillor Marcus Chambers, says how those cameras impact RCMP will be helpful in making decisions for Winnipeg Police.
This is an opportunity now that the RCMP have deployed this technology that we get our learnings from them in terms of what can be utilized in terms of the investigation.
Chambers says Manitoba has legislation that such footage isn't allowed to be shared publicly, but it will be helpful for accountability. He says in many cases there are already surveillance cameras and people with cell phones recording events. Some charitable organizations in Winnipeg worry the Canada Post strike will put a dent in donations they need. These charities rely on donors, many of whom send their checks by mail. But the postal strike has brought mail delivery to a halt right across the country. Mary Beth Taylor at the Winnipeg Foundation wants donors to give in other ways, like online.
We're using social media to push out the message for the entire charitable sector, not just the Winnipeg Foundation. We're wanting donors to go online, learn what the charities are looking for this holiday season, and make online gifts.
More than 55,000 unionized postal workers across the country have been off the job since November 15th. The mayor of Swan River appreciates the province's help dealing with the drug problem, but says the solutions so far have been piecemeal. Rural regional health authorities are getting $30,000 each to clean up and dispose of needles. The move was spurred by complaints of needle litter in Swan River. Mayor Lance Jacobson wants to know how the province will help rehabilitate people addicted to drugs.
What is your plan? We can't just go around saying, okay, we're going to, spend a bunch of money and collecting needles and hiring people or staff or whatever to take on this role. We need to have a plan. And we're still waiting to see what the province is going to deal with.
Right now, needles are only being handed out in Swan River through Public Health. A nonprofit group stopped distributing them, and the emergency room at the local hospital stopped handing out needles temporarily because of the litter problem. Canadians heading to the U.S. for Black Friday and Thanksgiving are being warned, plan ahead to minimize waits during the busy travel season. Canada's Border Services Agency is monitoring traveler volumes for peak periods and will take steps to minimize waits at both land crossings and at international airports. However, it says travelers can avoid long lines if they head out in the early mornings. It also says it's important to have travel documents and declarations ready. Well, playing the legends. Organizers have announced Rod Stewart will play the Legend slot at Britain's Glastonbury Festival next year, more than 2 decades after he headlined the music festival in 2002. The rock star, who turns 80 in January, said on social media he is proud and more than able to take the stage again to titillate his friends at Glastonbury next June. Rod Stewart there for you. You can find more Manitoba news. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Wow, man.
He's 80.
I know. I hope I have that kind of energy at 80. That's like, wow. Good for him. Thanks, Heather.
And that song, incredible.
I know. Perfect. Perfectly chosen. Thanks for playing it. It's a good one, too. Take care.
Thank you.
That's Heather Wells. She's back tomorrow with us, of course, with our news. Big thanks to her and to Megan Ketcherson and Joni Nicolo in our news department, as well as our live team, Corey Funk and Abby Adiyemi and Kevin Ipatebo. Speaking of Corey, he's in with the last quick look at our commute.
Donald and Ellis, there's a collision. Eastbound and westbound median lanes are blocked right now on Donald and Ellis. So and southbound curb lane as well, one middle lane blocked as well. Still also a problem. Fermor and St. Mary's Road, things really backed up. Things are flashing red at that intersection. I heard earlier from someone that is very, very, very backed up. So look up for that.
All right. Thanks, Corey. Abby.
Across board, we're looking at cloudy conditions with a slight chance of flurries in most of the regions. Winnipeg at -7, similar condition across the Red River Valley. We're heading for a high of 6 today. For Brandon and the Westman region, that will be feeling very cold this morning with that high of -26. While for the Parkland and the Interlake region, we're going to see more like a mix of sun and clouds there, and then cloudy conditions with highs around -11, -6. But Winnipeg, we didn't move much today, but -7.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Corey Funk, what are you doing?
Oh, I'm eating some leftover chicken and stuffing because I'm really hungry.
That smells amazing. Get out of the studio. I'm starving. I'm just kidding.
It's okay. Better than the time you put on dry shampoo in the studio. So I can't get over that.
It's true. That was an accident, by the way. I just pressed and that smells amazing. Yes, in answer to your question, listeners, when you get up at 4 a.m., you do eat lunch at 8:36. That's the time it is now. Take care, be well. Thank you for listening to Information Radio on CBC. I'm Marcy Marcusa. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. The Currents coming up next.